A CEO's number one objective is to maximize a company's value. And the number one way to achieve that is for the CEO to do no work. That's right, you heard me correctly. A CEO should strive to do no work, but there's more to doing no work than simply sitting on a beach with an umbrella drink in your hand. In the next 2.5 hours, I'll share with you everything I learned in 20 years as a 6-time venture and private equity-backed CEO. How I led teams that generated billions in revenue, which resulted in multiple high-value exits. I'll show you how to immediately increase your revenue, reduce your expenses, and create a strategic plan to grow your revenue up and to the right, and ultimately towards an exit. And the best part, everything I cover can be executed in less than 30 days. This won't take a year or two to implement. No, you'll be done and running a better, faster growing, more profitable company in just 30 days, 1 month. But wait, there's even a better part. I'm giving this knowledge to you for free. That's right. I'm giving you 2 decades of real-world CEO experience in just 2 hours, all for free. Think of this as a $10,000 executive coaching session, or better yet, let me save you 2 years and $250,000 of a graduate MBA program. Your only investment is your time to watch this video. Whether you run a small family-owned business or a 9-figure business, I guarantee the next 2 hours will make you a ton of money. Hi, I'm Richard Jolly Chandra, or RJ, the CEO coach. And I'm a 6-time venture and private equity-backed CEO who has generated over $4 billion of revenue and done billions of dollars of M&A transactions, both on the buy side and, more importantly, the sell side. During my career, I was coached to great success, and now I coach other CEOs to achieve their own higher levels of success. In the past, I've been paid $10,000 for 2 hours of my time to coach CEOs with this exact presentation. And that made me think, why does this content have to be so exclusive or behind a paywall? You also might be asking, if it's so valuable, why am I not charging for it? Well, it's pretty simple. I'm retired. I'm lazy. And I just want this knowledge out in the world. Also, when I look back at my career, I thought about my first CEO gig. And I remember I had no idea what I was supposed to do. I was totally clueless. And frankly, I had imposter syndrome because no one teaches you how to be a CEO. There's literally no training program or how-to courses for CEOs. You can get an MBA, but that doesn't really train you to be a CEO. And there's no CEO 101 course. And learning on the job is kind of like learning to play golf. Everyone sucks when they start playing golf. And it takes years before you aren't totally embarrassing yourself on the course. Think of how crazy that is. Literally every other function in business has education and training. You name it. Marketing, sales, finance, HR, engineering, operations, logistics, customer service. You name it, there's literally training or classes or courses for every job and career track. But for CEOs, nothing. For the most important job in business. So I decided to give my experience away for free. In the next 2 hours, I'm going to share the actual playbook that made me a successful CEO for 20 years. Welcome to the 30-Day CEO Playbook. How to master your business and become an elite CEO. In this video, you'll walk away with a tactical to-do list of the things that great CEOs do. More importantly, you'll also learn the CEO mindsets that are the difference between incremental growth and transformational growth. This isn't just theory. It's a battle-tested framework for CEOs who are serious about winning. The 30-Day CEO Playbook is literally the fastest way to level up your CEO game and to help you grow and scale your company and plan towards an eventual exit. So are you ready? All right, let's dive in. But before we do, please like this video and subscribe for more strategies on how to level up your CEO game. And if you click the link below, you can also download this presentation to follow along and take notes and learn more about the 30-Day CEO Playbook. All right, let's get started. I appreciate you watching this course, but technically, this isn't a course. This is an actual playbook. This is a playbook designed to help you become a better CEO and optimize your company in just 30 days. Everything you're going to learn here will translate into immediate action that will move your company forward. We're looking forward to watching your progress and seeing your success. So without any further ado, let's jump into this. Here's the agenda and the course syllabus. We'll start with a few prefacing comments about the playbook, some tips and tricks about it and how to use it, as well as some caveats. Then we're going to dive into the guts of it. Part 1 of the 30-Day CEO Playbook is about mindset. While the course is called the 30-Day CEO Playbook, I like to think of part one is paraphrased as the 30-minute CEO. Here, we're going to give you 3 simple mindsets that the most successful CEOs use. Simple concepts, but total game changers for how you think about your business. Part 2 is all about action. This is the actual CEO playbook itself. This is achieving a total understanding and mastery of your business. We'll give you a set of plays that build a foundation for success that can be performed in less than 30 days so you can see immediate results. And part 3 is the growth section. What happens beyond 30 days? How do you keep developing as a leader and a CEO? Here, we'll talk about your ongoing and next level CEO development. And of course, this wouldn't be fun if there wasn't some sort of bonus content in this as well. So I have a 4th bonus mindset hidden somewhere inside this video, and as well as a big pro tip on exit planning. And we've also got some tools in the appendix for you as well, because we're going to ask you to do some things in the next month, and we have some working templates that will help you run those plays. We've also got a more detailed contents page, and we'll use that to track our progress as we go through the various parts and sections of the course material. You'll see this updated as we go, and I'll supply the detailed contents again in the course notes that you'll get at the end of the course or if you download the slide deck. And as you can see highlighted right here in blue, we're at the start of the course, beginning with the preface. All right, before we get into the heart of the 30-day CEO playbook, I think it's really important that you know where it came from, what its limitations are, but also what its possibilities are. A quick note here. Some of you may want to jump ahead to the good parts, and I welcome you to do that. And for that, this video has chapters in the video progress bar, so you can find exactly what you're looking for and jump ahead to it. That said, I would encourage you to watch the origin story and preface so that you can get the most out of the 30-day CEO playbook. Who should use it, how it should be used, etc. Context is important. Okay, let's start by revisiting the origin story of where the playbook came from. As I mentioned, I'm a 6-time venture and private equity-backed CEO. I was not a founder, but I was the guy, the Navy SEAL, so to speak, that investors or boards of directors would bring in to take over from a founder when a company was either in trouble or even just stalled and needed a little jump start. Because I was parachuted in, I was given the same mandate every time I took over a company. The board of directors and investors would literally say to me, RJ, you've got 30 days to tell us what we've got here. What do you think are the possibilities? What do you think are the challenges? What are our opportunities? Come back to us in 30 days and report back where you think you can take this. Should we kill it or can we grow it and eventually sell it? Fortunately, we never had to kill anything, but we were able to grow everything and eventually actually sell everything. But that was my mandate, 30 days. And in one case, I only had 2 weeks, come back with a report and a plan. So I ended up developing a very quick and rapid process that allowed me to go in and quickly assess things about a company, meet all of its employees, understand its key constituents, understand the challenges the company is having, as well as the opportunity, and at least form a thought about where this company ends up in terms of finding and looking for a successful exit. So that was the mandate. And I literally worked the same playbook for 20 years in 7 different companies, 6 times as a CEO and 1 time as a number 2. The playbook really worked for me. So why did it work for me? Well, you heard what I just said about 30 days. Speed was a very important part of this. And so that's a big reason this worked for me. I had to act very, very quickly and assess things super fast and come up with a plan very quickly. And that's why it worked for me and why it's also going to work for you too. Now, I know there's a lot of other systems and courses out there that leadership and CEOs take on or apply. But the fact is, if you're running a company, who's got time to get a 2-year MBA or even a 1-year executive MBA, or even if you're going to implement something like EOS or scaling up, both great systems, those things take you time and they can take anywhere from 6 to 18 months to fully implement. And I say, who's got time for that? You don't have time for that. We don't have time for that. So this is why the 30-day CEO playbook will work for you as well. This is super fast. There's nothing in here that I'll ask you to do that you shouldn't be doing for your business anyway. So that's why the 30-day CEO playbook works. It's battle tested, it's super fast, it's universal. Let's look at some of the companies that I use this for. I had 2 companies that were pre-revenue, early stage startups, and we were able to take both of them to 8 figures and profitable, and we used the playbook. I also used the exact same playbook for 2 late stage private equity companies with 9-figure P&Ls. In fact, my last company had almost 2,000 employees in 11 countries, and I ran the exact same playbook with incredible success. So the playbook works from zero revenue all the way up to $500 million of revenue. And frankly, I could apply this to $5 billion or $10 billion of revenue as well. Now, some of the caveats. This playbook won't make you a great CEO by itself. Let's face that. There's a lot of work to be done. This is really just something that's going to give you a great foundation that gives you some of the frameworks and processes that great CEOs have. So this is not a panacea. I just want to make sure that you understand that. But here's what I love about this. There's nothing in this playbook that can't be completed in 30 days or less. Every play that you run will have an immediate impact on your company. There's no busy work and there's no touchy-feely BS or anything like that. Everything we ask you to do here is stuff that will move your company forward. And frankly, it's stuff you should be doing anyway. So in the next 30 days, I won't ask you to do anything that you shouldn't already be doing in some form or fashion. And as CEOs, I know some of you will have been operating in your role for some time, and you may already be doing some of these things, but I'm going to ask that you go through these processes again in a very holistic approach, that you can do all of these things in a 30-day period, so you end up with a very complete 360-degree view of the way to think about your business all at one time. The last caveat is really just a reminder. The 30-day playbook is just that. It's a start. Your CEO journey goes way longer than 30 days. But hopefully this playbook gives you a foundation that will last you for 30 years. As I mentioned, I use this exact playbook for 20 years. All right, you're ready to dive in now. And please remember, we're here to help. We want you to succeed. And if you've got questions, we will be available. That's enough of a preface. Let's get into this. Mindsets are actually pretty simple ideas. Yes, what I'm about to discuss with you, I could literally tell you in 3 minutes, or actually I could extend it for 3 days too. But they're very simple ideas. And you may actually go, how valuable are those? Well, I will tell you from my personal experience, these simple ideas were probably the things that made my career. Not all the other tactical stuff that we're going to go through in the playbook. Those are super important too, especially from an operational and executional standpoint. But it was really the mindsets that I had about the way I was going to run a company that was much more powerful than the simple appearance of what the ideas were. And frankly, the first one I'm going to cover was hands down the most valuable, and it literally guided every decision I made as a CEO. And yet it's such a simple idea that I could say it in 10 or 15 seconds to tell you what it is. I'm going to unpack it, of course, but the idea itself is actually really simple. Okay, so remember we said part 1 is what I call the 30-minute CEO. These are the 3 mindsets of successful CEOs. 30 minutes, but these could be executed over 30 months. And frankly, I've used them for 30 years. So 30 minutes, 30 months, or 30 years. That's how powerful these mindsets are. Now, our first quick progress check to tell you where we are. We just finished our prefacing comments, and now we're going to jump into the 3 mindsets that will change the way you think about your role as CEO and greatly increase your ability to grow and scale your company. CEO mindset number 1. In my coaching practice, this is hands down the number 1 thing I teach all my CEOs and founders. And this is what my mentor taught me very poignantly. Hands down, the single biggest unlock and game changer in my entire CEO career. The number 1 objective for every CEO is to do no work. That's a dramatic statement, yet I'm telling you to do no work. And you're looking at me like I'm crazy going, wait a second, CEO is the hardest job in the world. Well, I am telling you that your objective as CEO, the one thing you want to strive for as CEO is to do no work. Now, let's unpack it. Doing no work doesn't mean you aren't working. Rather, it means you built the team, the system, the processes where the company doesn't need you in the day-to-day to be successful. You're no longer involved in the delivery of products or services that you sell. The exec team has every functional operation of the business covered. You're still meeting and mentoring and managing your team and key stakeholders, but you're not involved in the delivery or execution. You're thinking about what's next and what's next after next, and you're spending a significant time outside the company. You're talking with customers. You're thinking about M&A. You may be talking with investors, competitors, strategic partners, or potential acquirers. And you may be proving the old CEO adage, you're working on the business versus in the business. Let's do a quick case study. Now, I mentioned I was hired as a number 2 as a company doing a turnaround. The company was run by a very successful CEO who had taken 3 companies public. We ended up going from barely surviving to a total rocket ship. But before it became a rocket ship, I remember getting hired and being on the job for about a month. And I was shocked by how little presence our CEO had in the office. He would come in at the crack of 10 a.m. and leave at 4:30. While he wasn't around much, I still knew he was around because anytime I emailed, called, or texted him, he would respond immediately. But he wasn't in the office that much. And even when he was, half the time, he appeared to be looking out the window. So finally I went into his office and I asked him, "Hey man, I'm working my butt off here. I'm trying to help you lift this thing and I'm working 12, 14-hour days. What are you working on?" And he's like, I'm not working. And I look at him like, WTF? And he says, well, I hired you to do the work and I'm not trying to be involved in doing any work. That said, I think about the business 24/7 all the time. And that's when he told me that his mentor had taught him his number one objective as a CEO was to figure out a way to do no work. And over the next 12 months, I watched my CEO as he proceeded to hire an incredible executive team. And we kicked butt. We grew 700% in 30 months and ended up with the biggest exit of my career. And it was an incredible rocket ship, an incredible ride, an incredible experience. But the biggest takeaway from the whole experience was that I saw my CEO actually succeed by doing no work. Like I said, he wasn't doing nothing. He was thinking about the business 24/7 and thinking about strategy, where we go, new products, new markets, new partnerships, new channels, whatever, and how we finance our growth. And eventually we'll grow to an exit. And we did. And another crazy thing about that company is we had 8 members on our exec team. 6 of them became CEOs after we sold the company. My mentor has succeeded in doing no work by hiring a team of Navy SEALs, functional experts in every key area of the company, marketing, sales, technology, legal, you name it. Whatever the functional requirement was, he hired a total Navy SEAL that ended up becoming a CEO of their own domain to the point where our CEO achieved the goal of doing no work. And it was 100% the best thing for the company's success. So how do you get to doing no work? Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to figure out which jobs you can fire yourself from. And so if you're a bootstrap founder, it's very clear that when you start a company, or even if you're early stage or even medium stage, you may still be doing quite a bit of the work. You may be the best person in the company at 5 different functions in the company for that matter. As you start building your team though, hopefully you're hiring people that are better or equal to you. And even if they're not quite as good as you, maybe they're almost as good, you still need to just trust people and get out of the way so that you can start thinking about how you scale the company beyond incremental growth to transformational growth. You're going to hear me talk a lot about the difference between incremental growth and transformational growth. I'll refer to that multiple times, but you can't have transformational growth if you're busy actually involved in the delivery and execution of products and sales and operations. So the takeaway here is hire people who are as good or better than you at every critical function of your business. And the thing about doing no work is you're not going to get there overnight. You can't just drop into a CEO job or found a company and get to a point of doing no work immediately. It's not going to happen. That's just completely unrealistic. What you need to do is create a plan and a timeline where you can start firing yourself from different roles and different functions to the point where you're going to end up in a place of doing no work. So how long does it take to achieve doing no work? Generally speaking, it depends on the stage of the company, the size of the company, and a couple of other factors. Like I said, I was a drop-in Navy SEAL, so I took over from founders who had already done a lot of the heavy lifting to get a company off the ground. So in my case, it took me somewhere between 6 and 24 months to get to a high degree of doing no work. In one case, I was able to do it in about 3 or 4 months, unique case. And another important thing that I want to say is don't think of doing it as an all or nothing goal. Your goal is 100% no work. But even if you got to 50%, that means that 50% of the time you're thinking about growing the company. When I talk about a timeline of getting to the goal of doing no work, I want you to create a plan where the first goal might be to do 10% no work and then progress up to 25% no work, then 50 and 75, and eventually as close to 100% as possible. Here's another crazy thing. Even if you achieve 100% do no work, it's not a permanent state. because the reality is once you hit 100%, you're going to have a lot of free time and you're going to be exploring all kinds of opportunities, new avenues, potentially new sales channels, new products, acquisitions, all that stuff. What'll end up happening is you'll create something new, or you'll have some other business or product innovation or sales or marketing innovation channel or something like that that's going to require you to jump back into the business and help get those new initiatives off the ground. So for example, if you're launching a new product, your existing team may not have the time or bandwidth or capacity to get that off the ground. So you may need to jump back in and make it happen, put the whole thing on your back and kind of get it off the ground. So you may be at 100%, but then you may go back to 50% or maybe even back to 25% do no work. So the level of do no work is not a static thing. It never stays still. As I said, your goal is 100%. You do your best to get there, but you'll never be able to truly achieve 100%. As I said, even if you get there momentarily, or even if you get to 50% or 70%, you're way ahead of the game. Then, as you find new levels of growth, new opportunities, your percentage of doing no work will go back down and it'll fluctuate. What does it look like when you achieve the goal of doing no work? I remember the first time that I achieved it, and it was actually maybe a year and a half into my first CEO role. Remember I said I had no idea what I was doing in that first role, so it took me a little bit longer. I was totally learning on the job and I was being coached and all that. But I remember that day. I remember it very clearly. It was a Wednesday and it was 2:30 in the afternoon. And I remember going into my office to check my email and calendar. And I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, looked at the screen, and there was nothing in my inbox and nothing scheduled. I suddenly looked around the office. First, I saw an incredible leadership team, and then I saw the teams that they'd hired, and I realized it. I did it. I literally got up from my chair, put my arms in the air and said, I did it. I got us to the state of doing no work. And once I was there, I was able to create an innovation for that company almost every 6 months. I'd literally come up with something new, and then I'd have to drop down from 75, 100% down to maybe 25 to 50% doing no work. I'd launch that, I'd have to get it off the ground, or we acquired a company or something like that. I'd have to get my hands dirty before I could refocus on getting myself out of that by, again, building a team that took over that product or initiative. Anyway, the whole concept of doing no work is really something that is theoretical, but it's also super practical. It's theory, it's a metaphor, but the point is, get your calendar so you've booked a lot of freedom in it, where you have time to be creative, to research, to mentor, to advise, to recruit new talent, to explore things not in the normal course of business. Again, you'll start thinking about transformational growth versus incremental growth. So, how do we know that we've achieved the goal of doing no work? Well, as I said, you'll find your inbox is empty, your calendar is free, your exec staff meetings will surprise you because the company is doing well and the meetings are short. Then you go on vacation and things run out even better. And you realize you could probably leave for 3 months and the company would perform the same or better. You really know you've hit it out of the park when the company is doing just fine without you. Now, a quick warning. You may feel like you should be doing something, or you may feel guilty that you're not doing something. That's just a CEO's natural instinct. That's the way entrepreneurs are built. We're doers. But my warning is this: don't do it. That's my warning. Don't feel guilty. Don't do work. Stick to the do no work objective. Now, what do you do once you've achieved a high degree of no work? Well, start filling your empty calendar with slots and creative research and strategy work. I literally block my calendar. It always looks full, even if I'm not actually doing work. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how you calendar towards the end of the course, but right now I'll just say I block my calendar off with strategy time, thinking time, competitor calls, client calls, and yes, even exercise and me time. And I'm a huge proponent of work-life balance. So if some of that time goes back to connecting with your family, your wife, your kids, your husband, all of that, those are the kinds of things that are going to recharge you. So that when you need to dive back in and go from a 75 to 100% do no work state back down to a 25% do no work state, you're going to be ready. You're going to be totally recharged. You're going to be able to basically take on a lot more because you're fresh and you have all those creative juices flowing. The section takeaway here is the first mindset of doing no work means you have the time to focus on growing and scaling your company, not running it. And that's a massive game changer. Probably the single biggest factor in my success as a CEO. So if you're not working in the business, what are you actually responsible for? And that leads us to mindset number 2. But before we do mindset number 2, if you like number 1, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more elite CEO mindsets. And again, click the link below if you want to download this presentation and learn more about the 30-day CEO Playbook. Okay, CEO mindset number 2 is a CEO really only has 3 true responsibilities to achieve success for the company. Now, I know you're thinking every CEO's got a massive to-do list with dozens, if not hundreds of important tasks on that list that need to get done. Sometimes you look at it and you're just like, oh my God, I'm never going to get all of this done. Well, here's the dirty little secret of elite CEOs. A CEO can let every task slip as long as you successfully completed 3 key responsibilities. And those 3 key responsibilities are this simple. Number 1, form and articulate a clear vision for the company. 2, recruit and retain and lead a great team to execute that vision. And 3, ensure the company has the financial resources to execute that vision. Like I said, you could have 100 things on that long to-do list, but if you just complete those 3 things, you could literally fail at everything else, and that's pretty cool. I say it here in jest, but you can literally suck at everything else and still succeed if you achieve those 3 to-dos: vision, team, and funding. Now, here's a shocking insight, but it's actually not that shocking. Mindset number 1 and mindset number 2 are totally related. Let me give you a case study here. The biggest company I ever ran had a 9-figure P&L and nearly 2,000 employees in 11 countries. Very big, huge team. Big span of control for me as a CEO, big numbers, big company. When I took over, the company was in chaos. And of course, we implemented the 30-day CEO Playbook and got things back on track very quickly. We were able to dramatically increase revenue, reduce cost, and grow like crazy. That said, when the company achieved its best growth rates, I was probably only working 15 to 20 hours a week. I had achieved an incredibly high degree of doing no work. But more importantly, I'd articulated the vision, I'd recruited and retained an incredible team. And of course, I made sure that the company had the money we needed and the working capital to run the business. But it was really building the team that made the difference. Back to mindset number 1. We had an incredible exec team with 12 people on it. Each member averaged over 18 years of experience. So they were really good at what they did. And with a team of Navy SEALs in place, I actually didn't have to do that much work. And the small amount of work I did was going to meetings, one-on-ones, one-on-twos, two-on-twos, exec staff meetings, and occasionally I'd drop into departmental meetings just out of curiosity or to show my face. More importantly, I had plenty of time to spend thinking about our business, talking with competitors, yes, competitors, customers, key employees at every level of the organization to get ideas. And of course, I had time to do strategy, to come up with acquisition ideas and new product ideas and things like that. So here's the thing. Once I achieved the goal of doing no work, I articulated the vision, I hired the team, got the heck out of everybody's way. They just took the ball and ran with it, and I didn't have to do much work, even for a massive company. So the section takeaway here is, and I say this tongue in cheek, is that I can totally suck at getting stuff done because I've articulated the vision, built the team to execute, and provided the requisite financial resources. Here's an elite CEO pro tip. I've got a few of these in the course here. Instead of sucking at everything that's on your to-do list, besides your 3 key responsibilities, of course, see mindset number 1 and delegate them properly to the great team that you've hired. How freeing does that feel? Pretty darn incredible, actually. All right, let's go to CEO mindset number 3, and that's profit mindset versus growth mindset. And this is a super important one. So I'm going to say that one more time. Profit mindset versus growth mindset. And I'm going to ask you, do you know which one you are? So what is profit mindset and what is growth mindset? Most founders and CEOs are naturally predisposed to profit mindset because, heck, making money is a good thing, right? Every CEO wants to make more money than they spend. So that's a pretty natural way to think. In particular, people who bootstrapped a company are usually incredibly profit mindset. They've had to scratch and claw their way to survive. So profit mindset is the safest and most natural way to think. We make money. But the problem with profit mindset is that it's probably got a lower upside. On the other hand, a growth mindset is riskier. You're investing in your profits. You may be even doing some deficit spending, but if those bets pay off, you have a much bigger upside. So the easiest way to describe this is like a venture-backed entrepreneur is probably going to be in growth mindset. How many times have you heard the cliches of startups with venture capital that they don't need to make money and they can just lose money forever? Well, they can lose money if they keep growing, but that's a good example of extreme growth mindset versus profit mindset. Now, when I talk to entrepreneurs, many CEOs believe that you have to be one or the other. And let me just tell you, that's not true. Profit and growth mindsets are not mutually exclusive. However, you do need to have a self-awareness of what your balance between profit and growth mindset is and which mindset is dominating it at any given time. Let's look at this a little bit. You see on the left side of the slide, you have a bootstrap company, which is heavily focused on profit mindset due to the natural muscle memory of scratching and clawing their way to profitability. It's make money or die. On the right-hand side, you've got a venture-backed company that's 95% growth mindset, that's grow or die. So you have to make money or die on the left, and you have to grow or die on the right. People might get the vibe that I'm implying there's something wrong with profit mindset. Let me be clear about this. There's absolutely nothing wrong with profit mindset, except when it prevents growth. So how can profit mindset prevent growth? Well, you've heard of the cliches, can't see the forest for the trees, penny wise, pound foolish, can't see the end of your nose. So let's put this another way. Profit mindset becomes a problem when there's too much muscle memory of saving money versus making money. And so the issue becomes that the CEO is looking at the cost of things versus the return of things. Instead of looking at expenditures as an investment that is going to garner a return, it's only looked at as a cost. A simple example here might be the hiring of a VP of marketing. The CEO who's deep into profit mindset sees a $250,000 cost. Conversely, the growth CEO sees an incremental $5 million of revenue. Now, they're both looking at the same hire, but one is thinking about the downside and the other is planning for the upside. So let's illustrate this with another case study. I had a client a couple of years ago that was running a bootstrap SaaS company, software as a service, phenomenally profitable, really, really incredible financial performance. Yet it was slow growth, no growth. And it was growing, but it was only growing 10 to 20% a year. And when I looked at it, I was immediately struck. I was like, oh my gosh, this company should literally be 3 times the size that it is today, even in spite of its incredible success. What happened was the CEO was constantly looking at hiring people as a cost rather than understanding that the new talent could and would drive growth. So let's say you're a $5 million company and you want to become a $15 million company. You're probably going to need talent that's worked at a $15 million company, which is not necessarily the talent that got you from 0 to 5 million. In my client's case, the lack of talent and headcount was totally holding the company back. Growth was going to require hiring a full executive team and many more salespeople. And whenever we discussed these new hires, all the CEO talked about was, well, wow, these people are expensive. For example, instead of looking at each salesperson as equaling $2 million of revenue, the CEO only saw $200,000 of expense. And that's what I'm getting at. Profit mindset got in the way of growth mindset, even though the company was clearly making enough money to make these operating investments easily afford the new hires. Growing revenue would have greatly expanded these profits, but sometimes you have to spend money to make money. Fortunately, that CEO began to see the light and started making some of those operational investments, and now they're growing very nicely. Now, we're talking about CEO mindset number 3, but it's also good to go back and look at CEO mindset number 1, because you're starting to see how CEO mindset number 1 and number 2 are related. Now I'm going to show you how number 1 is related to number 3. Remember, the goal of number 1 is to do no work, which basically means you're working on the business versus in it. Are you obsessed with getting stuff done? Or are you thinking about what's next and what's next after next? And back to the case study of our SaaS company. When I took on that engagement, the CEO was so deeply involved in every aspect of the business that he wasn't able to see growth opportunities directly in front of him. He was consumed with an exhaustive to-do list and literally working 10 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. Even though he was making really good money, he had no time to think at all, which was missing the opportunities and the big opportunity to make great money. So a couple of takeaways here. Doing no work also improves your vision because you have the time and the space to see it. Improved vision leads to growth mindset because, again, you've got time to see things. All of a sudden, you see growth, you see the new product, you see the new channel, you see the new marketing strategy, all those things. Growth mindset equals bigger outcomes. Let's remember a couple of things here. Both mindsets are not mutually exclusive. You can grow fast and be profitable at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive. You need to be totally aware of your mindset because sometimes if you go too much into growth mode, you can also get out over your skis and ruin your profitability. So again, you need to understand where your balance is. You also need to be aware of different stages. Different stages likely require different mindsets. Things change. So as I said, early stage bootstrapper absolutely needs to be in profit mindset. But once they've attained some escape velocity or some financial critical mass, they can shift into growth mindset. Lastly, whatever your mindset is, I want you to bake your mindset into your financial model. We're going to talk a lot more about financially modeling later because it's critical to a business. But whatever mode you're in, whether you're in profit mindset or growth mindset or wherever your balance is, you need to have that baked into your financial model. Now, ask yourself, am I a do no work CEO? In other words, do I have the capacity to focus on growth? Is my team running the day-to-day of the core business without me? Then you might be ready for growth mindset. So remember our pie charts. I think pie charts are the simplest expression for understanding your equilibrium between profit and growth mindset. So now look at our new pie charts and how they've changed. Both pies are now growth mindsets, but slightly different stages. On the left-hand side, we're 2/3 profit mindset, 1/3 growth mindset. We've gotten some financial critical mass. We're starting to make some operational investments. In this case, our CEO has probably attained a 25 to 50% do no work mindset. On the right-hand side, you'll see we're 50-50 in profit mindset versus growth mindset. In this, we not only have financial critical mass, but our CEO is now in a 50 to 75% do no work mindset and thinking about how to accelerate growth even more. And unless you're a complete venture-backed company with tons of funding or have discovered the biggest business opportunity ever with zero competition, I really don't want to see most companies go beyond a 50-50 balance of product and growth mindset. But again, the exception would be companies that are incredibly well-funded, either with excess profitability or venture capital that are fully intended to grow at extraordinary rates. So let's contextualize profit mindset versus growth mindset in another way. One of the most famous business coaches of all time is Vern Harnisch. He's the founder of EO and the author of Scaling Up. Vern says that CEO's number one objective is to maximize company valuation. Well, contrast that with what I told you that your number one objective is to do no work. I actually think Vern and I are saying the same thing, but in slightly different ways. Let's see how. Sometimes profit mindset gets in the way of maximizing valuation. Revenue and EBITDA are not the only things that drive valuation. Growth and velocity also have a very huge impact on company valuation. We've all heard the stories about unicorn companies that are growing like crazy and have no profit whatsoever. For those, growth and velocity are the biggest drivers of valuation. If we go back to the case study of my client who ran the SaaS company, remember they had fantastic 40 to 50% EBITDA margins, really incredible, but weren't growing very fast. Because of net margins, they were going to get a good multiple, no question about it. But they may get double the multiple if they had doubled or tripled their revenue growth with a lower profit margin. Now, if we consider Vern's number one objective for CEO is to maximize valuation, that clearly incentivizes you to have a balance of profit mindset and growth mindset. And lastly, I'm going to say this again, and you're going to hear me say this multiple times. Both profit and growth mindset should be reflected in your financial model. Let's say you've got a model right now that has profit mindset showing your unit economics and how you're going to make money and all that. But let's say you see new opportunities and decide to shift into growth mindset. You want to enter a new market, launch a new product, hire some new salespeople, different go-to-market strategy, a new channel, whatever. Those need to be reflected in your financial model because those are going to be operating investments. Those operating investments may temporarily lower profitability or gross margins or for a short period of time or something like that until those bets start paying off. You want them modeled so you can see where they're going to turn. They need to be reflected in the model. You can't just straight line and assume the same profitability, which means you might need cash flow planning or other plans to fund your growth. In any case, all I'm saying is bake in both profit and growth mindset into your model. Okay, the section takeaway for the third mindset. The do no work CEO uses both profit mindset and growth mindset with total awareness fully detailed in their financial model. And now let's do a recap of the whole mindset section, all part one, the 30-minute CEO mindset section. Let's review your 3 mindsets. Number 1, do no work. Number 2, achieve 3 critical to-dos for success. That's vision, team, and funding. And number 3, be aware of your balance between profit and growth mindset. Okay, now that you have the right mindsets, we're ready to kind of run the 30-day CEO playbook. But before we do, if you're enjoying the 30-day CEO playbook so far, don't forget to like and subscribe for more keys to CEO success. And to learn more about the CEO playbook and download this deck, click the link below. So let's jump into part 2, the actual 30-day CEO playbook itself. Total understanding and mastery of your business in just 1 month. Checking our progress, we've covered the preface, the 3 mindsets. So now let's discuss what we're going to cover in part 2. In this second part, we're going to act like a McKinsey consultant. What can you do in 30 days that is going to tell you everything you need to know about your business? These are the exercises and processes that'll help you do that. In the first section, we're going to discuss the meetings that you should have in those 30 days. Let's call it the 30-day meeting plan. The second section of part 2 is the line item review process. Specifically, we have 5 line item processes that'll teach you about every nook and cranny of your business, as well as opportunities and challenges. And the third section is another total game changer for you in your CEO toolkit. We're going to tell you about the 2 documents that you need to run your business. As you know, there are tons of tools you can use to run a business, but I always try and boil it down to the minimum number. And these are the 2 documents I believe that every CEO needs to run their business properly. And of course, we'll finish part 2 with some miscellaneous thoughts, tips, and tricks to round out the playbook. Now, a few thoughts about your 30-day mandate. It may look daunting. It may sound like we're asking you to do a lot, but I promise you, you can do all of this in 30 days. As I mentioned, I did this 7 times in less than 30 days. So you can do this. Some of the processes can be fully completed in a month. Other will just be started but well on their way to completion. The point is, you're going to check all of these boxes. If you can't accomplish or start these in 30 days, well, you might be the problem. So don't overthink this. Move fast. You're going to hear me say that over and over again. Move fast. And if you think about how this playbook was developed, I only had 30 days to kind of come back to a board of directors and let them know what my thoughts were. And I was able to complete this every time. So move fast. And let me repeat that again. Don't overthink this. Analysis paralysis is your enemy. So don't overthink things and move fast. Remember another thing that I said. The 30-day CEO playbook works for companies of all stages. As I said, I did 2 early stage pre-revenue companies and I did 2 late stage 9-figure companies with thousands of employees using the exact same process. It works across the board. Now, you may need to right-size some of these processes and maybe some of them are less relevant, but you can still go through all of these and check all of these boxes. And as I said before, you may already be doing some of these. Great for you. But I still want you to kind of go through these again as part of that holistic 360-degree view of your business all at one time. If you decide to abbreviate some of these, I urge you to at least go through the thought process. It's about getting that 360-degree view of the business all in one go that will make you see your business clearly and be able to see the bigger picture and bigger opportunities. And I'll say this again too. Don't be afraid to right size it. Not all of these are going to make sense for your business. If you're running a small 12-person bootstrap company, don't do all these exactly the same way that I'm saying you should do them. You've got to use some common sense and right size the exercises. That said, all of these could be applied to a company with 10,000 employees. So definitely think about how you can employ these frameworks and processes across your business. Now, before going on, let's address the process of how you're going to execute all of these tasks in 30 days. Let's look at a simple 4-week calendar. Let's break down each week so that you can think about how you sequence, start, and execute each play. Now, we haven't gone through each of these yet, but I think it will help before you go through this to see kind of a suggested calendar in advance so you're thinking about it as we cover each one of these items in depth. And we'll obviously review this again as we go through each exercise. I'd suggest that you plan your 30 days and start with the simplest place first. Mentally process your mindsets and start scheduling your meeting plan over the next 1 to 3 weeks. You'll also want to request the data required to do the line item analyses that we're going to cover shortly. That's week 1. In week 2, we're going to continue our meeting plan, again, which we're going to discuss in detail in a second, and we'll conduct 3 of the 5 line item analyses: OpEx, company census, and revenue analysis. You'll also want to do an outline of a first draft of your strategy doc. This might sound like a lot, but you're about to discover that the 30-day CEO Playbook is a very rapid process to get all this done, again, super fast. The other things you'll want to do in week 2 are schedule your financial modeling session with your CFO or FP&A resource, and that's week 2. In week 3, again, we'll continue the meeting plan with key constituents, and then we're going to do the 4th and 5th line item processes too. I'd suggest doing a second pass or quick reviews of other line item processes too. In other words, OpEx, company census, and revenue analysis, as each of these involve financial data that you're going to want to use in your financial modeling, which will also begin in week 3. Lastly, you'll start revising and editing your strategy doc daily, anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour, as you think of things, as you gather relevant information, and that should do it. That's week 3. In our last week of the month, week 4, we're really just tying up all of our plays and completing the playbook. You have a few key meetings left, but your real objective in the last week is to finalize your strategy doc and your financial model. After all, these are the 2 documents that are going to be your strategic plan and your roadmap to grow and scale the company in the next 12 months. So that's what your 30 days could look like. This calendar is just a suggestion, and you can plan your month any way that makes sense for you and your company. Another thing to think about with the playbook is that some of these processes you're going to want to do on a regular basis. In fact, I would dare say that you're going to want to do the entire playbook at least once a year as part of your annual planning process. Other plays could be done throughout the year. There may be some that you actually want to do on a monthly or quarterly basis. But for sure, you're going to want to do this whole thing, the whole playbook, at least once a year. And trust me, it does get easier the second time and third time and every time you do one of these processes. All right, let's jump into the playbook, starting with part 2, section 1, which is the 30-day meeting plan. Now, the objective here is pretty straightforward. It's to meet as many key people as you possibly can inside and outside of your company. Now, I know that if you're already in the CEO chair for years, you probably already know most of your people. I'm still going to ask that you right-size this process and meet your people with a different set of questions than maybe you do with your regular updates and progress reports. So I'd like you to meet as many people as possible, and we'll cover the types of questions that you should be asking so that this is a unique process versus the regular updates. As a starting point, I'm going to suggest that you do a quick all hands and let people know what you're doing. Give them a heads up. No need to make people worry that something bad may be happening. So just let your team know that you're doing some strategic planning exercises or you're working with a business coach and trying to become a better leader for them. Both of those are true. In any case, let your team know why you're asking questions and doing some deeper analyses around the company. It's all about raising your own game so you can help the company raise its game. Frankly, I love telling the team that I'm trying to raise my game. It demonstrates leadership and it tells the team that change is coming and it's good changes that are coming. As for the meetings, it goes without saying that you're going to meet your direct reports. Usually that's your executive leadership team. Depending on the size of the company, you may want to meet with some second level executives as well. At a big company, your meeting plan might include C levels and B levels and maybe a handful of director levels. One of the things you're going to want to think about though is trying to meet as many of the people managers, if not all the people managers, because it's important to know anybody that's actually managing people because they have insights about what the team is thinking, what their capabilities are, what blocks they have, what issues they have, all that kinds of stuff. Also, are there any key people that your leadership team recommends? And that could be a select individual contributor, somebody you know who might have great insights, who's maybe at the very bottom of the organization, but they have maybe an important role. So ask for nominations and use your judgment. You don't have to take every recommendation, but use your judgment because you won't have time to meet absolutely everybody in the company. After we've met with employees, the next group that I want you to meet are key clients. Not a lot, just 2 or 3 key clients. Now, I'm sure you talk to clients regularly, but meet them in this context, and I'll give you some specific things to ask them. I'd also say if you've got business development partners, potentially a sales partner or some other key strategic vendor that's key to operating your business, or a distributor or something like that, I would meet with them as well. Again, I'm not asking you to meet with all of them, 2 or 3 each, because again, you're just trying to kind of get that strategic insight. And lastly, I always say meet with competitors. Yes, talk to your competitors. I always talk to my competitors. So I'm going to encourage you to do that. Now, one thing, sometimes it's harder to meet competitors in less than 30 days because you don't have control of them. And they're also going to be a little bit suspicious of you. Like, why are you reaching out to me? But I always reach out to competitors under the guise of, is there potentially a business development partnership that we could do? Is there a strategic partnership? Is there a future M&A opportunity for either of us? Let's get to know each other, stay on each other's radar. And is there a way that we might be able to develop the overall market together so that all boats rise with the tide? Those are the types of things that I would reach out to a competitor about. Okay, now you've got some meetings set up. What do we actually want to ask? And remember, these meetings are not your regular progress reports or weekly staff meetings. These are quick, informal meetings where you can ask open-ended questions. They're only 10 or 15 minutes sit-downs, very short, very casual, no agenda. They're almost like a coffee break or something like that. Again, don't make these update meetings. Very easy to fall into the habit of just saying, let's go through regular updates. That's not the point of these. Ask open-ended questions so that people talk. You want to hear what they have to say, what they really think. Do not spend hours with anybody. That's not the point here. Literally 10 to 15 minutes. It's just to get a quick check-in with people and talk about things that aren't on their day-to-day responsibility or something else about the business. If you don't know somebody that well, ask, what are you working on and who are you responsible for? And then we get to the real fun and big open questions. What's working for you? What's not working for you? What's working for your department? What's not working for your department? And the company too. Just ask their opinions with open questions and shut up and listen. And remember this, anytime the boss is asking a question, the people you're talking to are going to be a little bit intimidated. No matter what kind of relationship, they're always going to be a little bit scared of your position of authority. They're probably giving you a little bit too much respect too. So you really have to go out of your way to make people feel comfortable. No. Let's just talk. I really want to know what's working for you and what's not working. You have to be really warm and welcoming. What do you like about the company? What do you dislike about the company? What could you improve about the company culture? What is the company culture is a really good one, and also what it should be. That's going to be an important one, by the way. Culture probably isn't something that you can fully address in 30 days, but you can actually get a temperature about what the culture is and what it should be. And then very important, what blockers do you have? What blockers does your department have? What blockers does the company have? What's holding us up? And who is holding it up is a really good question as well. And then I ask about the individual themselves. What do you think your strengths are? What do you think your weaknesses are? Suddenly get them talking about their coworkers too. Say something to the effect of, hey, I don't want you talking negatively about your coworkers, but honestly, tell me about them anyway. I do want to know. I say that with a little tongue in cheek, but it's really good. Tell me about your coworkers. Who's good? Who's bad? Who do you respect? Who do you learn from that's really good? You learn a lot about the way teammates talk about each other. And you also learn who may be toxic and may be a problem too. So as I said, you learn a lot about your team by how the other teammates talk about each other, both good and bad. So that's the meeting plan. Now we're ready to move into part 2, section 2, where the highlight is the 5 line item reviews. And let me just say this, these line item processes by themselves will pay for this entire CEO course or playbook many times over. And I'll show you how. These are the guts of the playbook that actually find cost savings and find revenue upside. First off, let's define what a line item review is. It's pretty simple. You're going to do a line-by-line analysis of critical parts of your business. And I mean line by line by line. And out of the whole 30-day CEO playbook, this is hands down the most time-consuming part of it. But you're also going to see, I'm going to prescribe these in a way that is super fast, super time efficient, and not overly burdensome. Because again, This whole playbook has to be done in 30 days. Now, down the road, past 30 days, you may revisit some of these line items and do a much deeper dive. But at the end of 30 days, we want you to have a mental picture that is at least 90% directionally correct so that you can have a really good view of your business. So again, line item analysis, line by line. The 5 line item analysis and reviews you're going to do are, number 1, OpEx budget. You're going to get a very specific way to go over your income statement. Number 2 is the team census. And number 3 is the client and revenue analysis. And number 4 is the product and service review. And number 5 is the quick competitor review. Then, when all the line item reviews are completed, you're going to have a totally comprehensive grasp of the most important aspects of your business. You'll be able to identify immediate cost savings, and probably more importantly than the cost savings, you're going to be able to target ways to grow revenue and grow it fast. You're also going to understand how your company works and who's working on what. I'm going to give you instructions and guidelines, call them rules, for these line item processes. Again, I want you moving really fast. I'm not looking to do an IRS audit or some exhaustive cavity search. We're trying to move fast. We're trying to learn as much as we can, as quickly as we can. As I've said in other parts of this, don't overthink it. Don't overinvest too much time. In fact, I've got suggested time allocations. Please try and follow the suggested time targets on the first pass. These are intended to be super quick exercises. As I said, you may find problems where you want to go back and do a deeper dive, but reserve that for another day and time for further investigation. The key here is to get as complete a view as possible in as short as time as possible. I've mentioned this before. A 70 to 90% understanding is good enough on the first pass. 100% will come later. But make no mistake, you absolutely can get 100% in some cases. But my point here is, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Get directionally correct signal, mark areas you may want to revisit after 30 days. Invariably, I bet the more you go through this, even after 30 days, you're probably going to go back and do these again and again. You might require multiple and regular line item reviews, particularly for OpEx, people, and revenue, because those involve money. And those are going to be the ones that are super critical from a financial standpoint. Eventually, you'll need to be 100% accurate on all those 3. But again, on the first pass, be quick. Over time, I have a feeling you're going to fall in love with these line item reviews, and you're going to end up creating a regular cadence. For example, monthly for clients and revenue, quarterly for OpEx and census, and then every 6 months for product, services, and competitors. Those are just suggestions. You'll find your own cadence that suits you and your company's needs. Number 1 is the OpEx budget review. The resources required here is a detailed income statement, specifically the OpEx portion. There is no template for this, so you're going to have to, as you'll see in some of the other line items, I provided some templates, but there is nothing for this. This is something you should be able to download from whatever your accounting system is, whether it's NetSuite, QuickBooks, Xero, Zoho, whatever accounting software you have. That's the thing you'll probably work off of. If you have a CFO or a fractional CFO, and if you don't have either of those, your CPA or bookkeeper, whoever is your lead numbers person, they aren't necessarily required, but I'd strongly recommend the first pass you allocate 2 to 4 hours with your FP&A person. If you're a really small company, it might only take 1 to 2 hours, but expect that first pass is probably going to be 2 to 4 hours. Now, what do you do with that income statement? First off, you're going to ask for the most detailed version of that OpEx portion of the income statement. Our goal is to understand how literally every single dollar at the company is being spent. You want to do this for the last year, the last calendar year, maybe the trailing 12 months, whatever. But I want you to go literally over every single line of OpEx, hence the name line item exercise. If you're a decent sized company, and if it makes sense, I would rotate your functional executives in that are responsible for the operating expenses in each of those areas. So you may pull in the head of marketing for 20 to 30 minutes to go over all the marketing expenses. If there's a product development, you might bring in the head of product. And if it's engineering, you bring in the CTO or the VP of engineering. What I'm saying is bring in the functional executive who's responsible for those expenditures and get an understanding and alignment with the functional exec and your finance person to fully understand these operating investments. I guarantee you're going to find all kinds of stuff and likely unnecessary expenses. You're going to understand where you're investing every single dollar and possibly wasting dollars. And more surprisingly, you might even find areas where you're underinvested. That's right. Yes, sometimes we find areas where we're not spending enough. It's great if you had a budget in the past, and we're going to talk about financial forecasting and stuff. But shockingly, a lot of small to medium-sized companies don't actually have a financial model or a forward-looking budget. But if you have a budget, it's really good to be able to compare the budget versus actuals as part of this line item process. Large companies usually have a budget, and so you'll be able to look at the budget versus actuals. You're understanding where the company is spending and investing money, but this process will also help you start planning for how you want to manage OpEx going forward. And that's a really important takeaway of this review. There's going to be some obvious cost savings, but you're also going to think about, what do I want to manage and how do I want to manage this better in the future? This is about knowing where every dollar is invested in your company. So let's take a quick look at an example. I've got a sample fake financial statement. It's not a real one, but as you can see here, I'm going to go through it looking at everything like operations, rent, utilities, office supplies, office food, employee meals, but the reviews can get way more detailed than that. I mentioned the largest company I ran, we did this, where there were 1,300 line items to review. And some of those had sub-line items as well. In marketing alone, there was probably 100 lines, maybe more. And there were literally just tons of things that we were spending money on, and we went through every part of it. Print out the OpEx portion of your income statement and just go over each one. If there's a summary line item, you have to go into it in the detailed line item of everything that was spent there. Double click and expand and see what it is in there in that bucket. Invariably, I found all kinds of stuff. Really dumb stuff. At one company, I found out we had multiple instances of Salesforce.com and multiple subscriptions to LinkedIn. There's always some employee who had a subscription to some software or something like that, and the person left the company and nobody's even using it anymore. These are the kinds of things that you find. And the other thing you may find too is that it's not just about cost saving. You may look at something and a line may stand out and we'll go, oh, are we really only spending that much on travel? That seems low to me. Maybe we should spend more so that our salespeople are in front of their clients more often. So you're mostly going to find cost savings here, but you occasionally will find something where we're clearly underinvested. This is about looking at how we're investing our money, good and bad. The second line item is the company census. All right, what's a company census? Company census is literally your headcount page. It's your team. And so here, the required resource is a headcount roster of every single employee. I like looking at this in a spreadsheet. I want to see everybody's name, title, comp, all that stuff I'll talk about in a second. I want my head of finance, my CFO, fractional CFO, head of accounting, whoever is the most senior finance person. And then if it's possible, depending on what size company you are, I'd love to include the head of human resources as well, or your fractional equivalent. I'd love that person to be there. It's not required, but it's strongly recommended. The expected time on this, it depends on how many employees you have, but I've allocated somewhere between 2 to 4 hours, but I could easily see 1 to 3 hours if you're a smaller company. If you've got a team of 15 people, this might only take 30, 45 minutes. I went through 2,000 employees and it took me 5 or 6 hours. Again, the time allocation depends on your company size. Now, here's what you're going to do, and here's what you're going to look at on the company census. Headcount is usually any company's biggest operating expense. So in line item number 1, we looked at OpEx. Headcount is usually an even bigger total expense, and one you're going to want to keep an eye on. In most companies, headcount can be anywhere from 60 to 80% of your total operating expenses. So this is super important to do this. But again, it's not just about cost. While people are your biggest cost, they're also one of your key assets too. So the census is super important to go through, not just from a cost standpoint, but you can also understand what everybody's doing, what their relative value to the organization is, and how you're allocating your most precious resource. Hiring people is an investment in the company. Like I said, I like having a spreadsheet with every person in the company with their name, title, position, department, functional group, start date, geography, geographic location, salary, and any kind of variable comp that they have, bonus or commission. Like the OpEx review, I'll also recommend that you bring in functional executives where necessary. For example, when you've got the CFO and the head of HR with you, if you're talking about the sales department, let's bring in the head of sales to talk about each sales rep. If you're talking about the marketing department, again, it'd be similar. We're going to bring in the head of marketing. We want to go over everybody in the marketing department. If we're talking about engineering, we bring in the VP of engineering or the CTO. That's the company census. And our big takeaways here are know your people, know what they do, know who you're investing in and how much. And there could be a number of takeaways from this where you're like, why is this person even here? Do we even need that head or that position? On the flip side, it could also be, wow, we're totally overpaying this person. And in some cases, even bigger mistake, we might be underpaying somebody where it's like, oh my God, we may have a retention risk with this person if we don't fix their comp. You're going to get a very detailed line item review of every person in the company, including yourself. Again, I've got fake financial statement here, dummy numbers in here. So you can already see kind of unrealistic numbers. As I said, it's just for a sample. My point here is you're going to go through this exercise. You're going to look at every single person that you're investing in and whether they've got the right size comp, it's either too high or too low, whether the position is justified, or in some cases, you're like, oh my God, we only have 4 people in client success. We need 6 people to serve the number of clients and sales reps that we have. So those are the kinds of things that you're going to spot when you do this line item analysis of your employee census. Now, a few minutes ago, I mentioned that we have some templates that may help you on this. Not all companies like doing this. This is one of the things that I do regularly. So I've actually included in the appendix a company census template where you can literally just fill in the blanks of all the data that we're looking for. You've got title, name, department, where they are, date joined, stuff like that. So that's in the appendix. Line item analysis number 3 is the client and revenue review. So this is the money that's coming in the door. We want to analyze it in a quick pass. And of course, the CEO is always thinking about revenue, and you may have been in the job for 5-10 years. I still want you to look at this through the lens that I'm asking you to look through. So the resource required here, if you're a B2B business, I want a client list. If you have 200 clients, I want a list of all 200 clients. We're probably not going to go through all 200 in the first pass, but I'm probably going to go through the top 20 in detail and then selectively in number 80 through 100 and maybe a couple towards the bottom of the 200. But you're going to need a client list and a revenue source. Now, if you're a B2C company with thousands, if not tens of thousands of customers, we'll talk about how to deal with that in a second. For this line item review, I want my fractional CFO or my CFO, but more importantly, I want my chief revenue officer, my head of revenue or head of sales, or in the case of an e-commerce company or a B2C company, product company, maybe the chief marketing officer or somebody like that. The expected time frame for this review is usually 1 to 3 hours. And again, this is a review, you're probably going to revisit this one over and over because frankly, this is money, this is revenue. In my experience, I've done the first pass in an hour and then I've gone back and done it over and over and over with the head of sales to the point where it's regularly a quarterly meeting or even more frequently like monthly. Let's go back to our B2B company for a second. And again, we'll come back to B2C, where we're going to go over the list of current clients and we can get our revenue line item processes down. So when you go through your top 100 clients, focus on that top 20 to start. Remember the 80-20 rule probably applies, where 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your clients. Or it may even be 60-40 in a B2B business. My point is, you want to go through every single line of top clients. Of note, you want to identify the underperforming clients as well as the overperforming clients, preferably on like the trailing 12 months or the previous calendar year. For underperforming clients, we want to understand why we underperform. It could be anything like we had a salesperson quit in that territory. We screwed up delivery. A competitor came in with a cheaper price. Whatever the reason, you just want to know what each of those top clients, why they underperformed. Same thing at the other flip side is you also want to go over the ones where you overperformed and understand why they overperformed. Now, while I'm only doing a sampling of the client list, I would 100% go and ask my CRO and his team to do the same exercise for every single client we have. As CEO, I don't necessarily need to know about every client, but the CRO and their team 100% should know 100% of the clients. But for CEO purposes, the top 20 and a sampling of the others is probably going to give me a really good idea of what's going on, both good and bad. Why did we succeed? Why did we knock it out of the park with some clients? And is there any way we can copy and paste whatever we did right with that one client and put it across to all of our clients who underperform, or even the clients who were on plan? Are there really any big wins or losses that would be case studies that we could replicate, or screw ups that we need to fix? I want to go through each client line item, and I'm going to have 3 columns that I'm going to look at, which are high, low, medium revenue cases. We have a template on how to do this, but feel free to create your own. What I'm looking for is each client's performance relative to our own expectations, high, low, medium for each one, and what the revenue source was. As I said, for most B2B companies, it's easy to do this because you can literally just go down and list all the clients. For other B2Bs, say SaaS, where you might have thousands of clients, you might want to treat that more like a consumer revenue analysis. So let's talk about what you do with a B2C company in this revenue analysis. For a B2C company where you may have 10,000 customers, what you're going to do is you're going to create client personas and customer segments. In other words, we can't analyze 10,000, but we can analyze 10 segments. We're going to create customer buckets that allow us to generalize the characteristics and needs of different customer segments. Perhaps you create 3 to 10 customer cohorts. Like, for example, you might have a persona of your luxury shopper, and another for your value shopper, and yet another for your volume price shopper. Your personas may be along demographic lines, male, female, high income, low income, etc. In any case, you're trying to bucket customers with similar buying characteristics so that you can, again, talk about what's working and not working with each customer segment. And more importantly, what types of offers and solutions work for each customer cohort? I've worked at both B2B and B2C companies, and you can do a very similar line item review from the B2B for your B2C business. I found that just as valuable for a B2C company to go through all the customer personas and understand what's working at each of those customer cohorts, what's not working as well. And then invariably, even with a B2C company, there's probably some examples of disaster case studies with individual customers that we want to talk about, as well as hero customers that were like, oh my God, these are the ones that we want to copy and paste for all of our customers. Going back to the B2B model, I might add prospective clients into this analysis as well. I wouldn't have an exhaustive list, but I want to have some key potential prospects that we could easily review what their revenue potential is. All right, what's the number one reason to do this revenue analysis? Well, pretty simple. We want to find more revenue. But here's something about the revenue line item analysis that's going to shock you. Let's be dramatic and pause here. This will literally shock you. You're probably underestimating your revenue. I've worked with hundreds of companies, even in my own companies. Almost every CEO I talk to underestimates their revenue for the next year, the next 12 months. Why? Because they don't have a good understanding of what their potential upside is and how they could work all those revenue cohorts to maximize each client relationship and customer segment. Most CEOs don't do a full-blown client-by-client revenue analysis, so you're probably underestimating your revenue. I meet CEOs all the time who think they understand their growth potential, and then we sit down and do the line by line, and we always find upside to their own expectations. The number 2 reason to do the analysis is to better understand your growth opportunities. As you go through this, your chief revenue officer might say something like, well, this one client would spend a whole bunch more money if we did X, Y, and Z. These are the things that should be coming up in normal meetings throughout the year. And sometimes they do, but it's shocking how often they don't. And heaven forbid, if your head of revenue or a sales rep has been thinking all along, well, we could have sold more if I'd had done this or we had this other thing. But again, you'll be shocked at how often it doesn't happen and why it's good for you to know. And also, it's really good for the CEO once you're out of the sales function to actually kind of understand what's going on with our best clients as well as the ones we're having trouble with. So here's a simple example. This is a SaaS company again. It's not a real company. It's a fake one. You've got a customer over here on the left, and we're going to go through what their revenue was last year. As mentioned, We have sample templates for you in the appendix, but you can put something like this together in a few minutes yourself. This is a B2B template. We've got B2C one in the appendixes as well. But if you look at this, you're going to see we've got some examples of companies here, actually very famous companies like Dunder Mifflin and Waystar Royco. But what I want to see here is what we did in the previous year, and then again, what the low, the likely, and the aggressive cases for revenue are in the next 12 months or next calendar year. This is going to be filled out by your head of revenue, your chief revenue officer, your head of sales, your chief marketing officer before you even sit down with them. And frankly, they may actually consult their salespeople to go client by client and do this exercise themselves. And if you're still in the revenue role yourself, then you've got to pull this together yourself. In your line item review, you're going to talk about each client, but you're also going to change some of the numbers based on your discussion. You're also going to see where the failures are, where the potential successes are. We also have a little notes column here. Is there anything that stands out about this particular revenue source or client? It's a very simple thing. This doesn't take that long. If you fill these columns out like this, it really doesn't take long at all. You can cover your entire revenue base in a very short period of time. And if you're like most companies, you do this line item, you're probably going to find some new revenue. I promise you. Okay, let's move on to line item review number 4, and that is the product and service review. Now, this should be a much faster line item process because likely you only have a limited number of products and or groups or families of products. For example, if you're a SaaS company, you might only have 3 products or 3 SKUs. But if you're an e-commerce company, you might have 1,000 products, but they can usually be grouped into product categories or families. And you may also be able to evaluate your hero SKUs. So out of that 1,000 products, maybe you have 20 hero SKUs or maybe 40 hero SKUs or something like that, where you can do the deep dive analysis. We'll talk about how you deal with that in a second. But again, this isn't meant to be a product roadmap brainstorm or anything like that. We just want to do a quick review that maybe leads to a product roadmap and strategy exercise later. Those are longer discussions, and this is a much quicker analysis. The required resources are going to be a list of current products. Very simple. It could be a product deck or even a printout of your website. For people, I would invite your head of product or whoever's in charge of product development. Your head of sales would be a nice option as you want them chiming in about what works for each of these products and why it doesn't work and where they succeed and where they fail. But the point is, you're not going to go through 10,000 products in this quick exercise. Similar to how we view revenue cohorts in a B2C business, you're going to be looking at groups and categories and families of products. With a big product portfolio, focusing on the big hero SKUs is also really important. We're also what are we going to talk about when we go through these lines? Things like what's generating the most revenue, what's the best margin, price point, volume, gross margin, discounting behavior. It could be something related to supply chain. Do we have issues with inventory or inventory management or any of those kinds of things? Strengths and weakness relative to the competition. Where are we ranked versus a competitor? Who can we beat? And who should we avoid in competition? Now, think of your revenue analysis and product review as related. They're very related. Your product portfolio obviously drives revenue and relationships with customers. But if you want to, you can dump your data in there. It's very simple, and you can literally just fill in the blanks. Again, you can see we've got a few important things here. What's the average selling price? What are our COGS, gross margin? What was our trailing 12 months of revenue? What are our forward next 12-month projection? And then notes a column that says what is going on and what needs to happen or something like that. All right, we're at our last line item analysis, and that's number 5. And that line item analysis is talking about our competitors. This review hinges on whether you're a B2B or B2C business. I wouldn't go over every single competitor you have, whether you're a B2B or a B2C business. I would only look at a list of your main competitors. Who do you match up against? Who do you find in battle the most often? Who are you winning against? Who are you losing against? For this analysis, I don't need a finance person because this is more of a strategic conversation. Totally optional, not required. I would like my head of product as well as my head of sales so that when we talk about these, we have a competitive intelligence point of view on it. So what are we going to do here? You probably already can imagine, we're going to look at our competitors' strengths and weaknesses. We're going to see where we rank versus each of them, how we stack rank ourselves against them. We're going to talk about who we could beat, who we should avoid in battle, whether they're a friend or foe. Are there possible business partnerships here? Is there the possibility of M&A down the road? Here's another pro tip. In addition to what you learn in the competitor line item analysis, if you remember earlier, I mentioned that I actually love talking to my competitors. I always talk to my competitors. It's one of the first things on my to-do list is to talk to competitors. Generally, as I said earlier, these meetings take longer to set up. These probably aren't going to get done in your 30-day window. The other CEO is probably going to be a little bit suspicious as to why you're reaching out. However, you can always do it under the guise of, hey, we're in the same industry. Is there something we can do to make all boats rise with the tide? Are there ways that we can cooperate? If you want to be bold, you can always say, hey, you never know. Maybe there's an M&A opportunity for us at some point down the future. Now, one thing that I'll add when you talk to competitors is that you're going to have to show a little leg, to use the expression, so to speak. You've got to give a little information, get a little information. So talk first, but not too much. And then remember, I love asking open questions. You heard me say that earlier with the employee meeting strategy. So ask open questions. Give a little bit. Hopefully you get a lot back. Great competitive intelligence. The takeaway of the competitive analysis is to know your competition, know who and where you can attack, and where you can look for white space in the market. Because that's the other thing I didn't mention. When you talk about competitors, you usually find that there are parts of the market that aren't served well by anybody. There's going to be a flip side of that, which is you're going to find places that are way too crowded, and maybe we need to get the heck out of that segment. Then, as it relates to your product portfolio, you might have unprofitable products because you've been in a very crowded part of the market. You look for white space, and that's a great takeaway as a result of this exercise. But again, you may also be looking at your products and realize, wow, these have really skinny margins versus some of the other products in our portfolio. And you may just want to start thinking about deleting some product. So again, in the appendix, we've included a simple template, a worksheet that you can literally list out a handful of competitors for this analysis. And again, what you're going to be looking for are they direct competitors? Are they indirect competitors like a distributor or something like that? If possible, I always love knowing their estimated revenue. If they're a public company, then obviously you can get those numbers. But if it's a private company, then it's good to even have a guesstimate. But it's good to know. Here's a surprising thing too. Remember I say I talk to competitor CEOs all the time. And invariably, they always start with something like, oh, we're a private company and we don't share our numbers, or something like that, or I'm not going to tell a competitor. Yet, by the end of our conversation, I usually know exactly or very close approximate how much revenue they're making. And that's either because they've told me explicitly or they gave me so much other indirect information that I could literally triangulate a perfect and accurate estimate of what the revenue is. It's always great to have that in your competitor analysis, to have that kind of data. Okay, now we've just covered all 5 line item exercises, and I want to walk you through a case study that shows you how powerful these line items are. This is for the last company that I ran that was a 9-figure P&L. This is how dramatic line item reviews can be if you do them correctly. Remember, line item number 1 is OpEx income statement. And in this particular company, the first time I sat down, we actually had to do a second session because we found so much. In all, we found $11 million of operating expenses is saved. Now, even though it's a 9-figure P&L, $11 million is a lot of money. Even if it was $1 billion company, that's a lot. We also did the revenue analysis, and we found $33 million in revenue upside, 3 times the original forecasted amount. And we realized that there was an even more to be had by going line by line. So the chief revenue officer then went back to his team and actually did a second planning for each of those clients and was able to come back with a plan that gave us $33 million in incremental revenue. Doing the company's census review, we also identified $8 million in headcount savings. Now, not all of those involve people going. We were able to get rid of a lot of those people through just natural attrition, but we were able to identify the fact there was going to be some level of attrition and that some of the people leaving were just not positions that we wanted to replace. And then in the budget, there had been a whole bunch of budgeted headcount that we simply didn't need. So we found another $8 million of cost savings out of our budget. We also did the product analysis, and guess what? We found unprofitable products and services, and we killed them and increased our profitability and reallocated all the people into open headcount roles in more profitable areas. It was amazing. We actually found one service where we were literally losing minus 10% margin every time we sold it. And we'd had it in this whole product portfolio that we felt that we needed to do to support the rest of the portfolio. And the reality is we didn't need it. We were losing money every time we sold that. And we're like, why would we do that? Okay, so it was actually pretty easy to get rid of. Then we did the competitor analysis, and I got all kinds of competitive intelligence information. And we ended up with at least 3 partnership opportunities where we did business with our competitors and actually made money and had productive relationships with our competition. The net result of all these 5 line item processes was we took a company that had a negative 20% EBITDA margin and we got it to a positive 23% EBITDA margin over an 18-month time frame. That is huge. Now, I'm going to remind you, that's a dramatic example, but I've done this same process at every company I've run, and I've done this with dozens of clients too. The 5 line item reviews always find cost savings, and they always result in revenue upside. And remember what I said about that. Virtually every CEO underestimates their revenue potential until they do this type of analysis. So you're going to find some revenue upside. You're also going to be able to hold your sales team's feet to the fire. $8 million in headcount savings. I would have been happy just knowing who all those people were and what they were working on, but you also get some savings too. And by the way, while we had headcount savings, we also increased the number of people's salaries because we realized we had some very key performers that were totally underpaid. So we killed multiple products. We identified several partnerships with quasi-competitors. Again, I've done this at companies of all sizes. Those are the power of the 5 line item reviews. Now, let's move to part 2, section 3, which is about the 2 simple documents to run your company. And I say that from the CEO vantage point only. You're going to use all kinds of tools, but these are the 2 documents that are the most critical to my success as a CEO. But what about the 2 documents that I think are super important for the CEO? Well, the 2 documents are 1, your strategy deck, and 2, your financial model. Now, you're looking at me thinking, RJ, of course we've got a strategy deck. And half the time when I say, let's see it, it's an old deck and it really doesn't have current strategy in it. In fact, it really doesn't have much of anything useful in it. I'm particularly shocked with small to medium-sized companies that I meet because almost none of them have a true financial model and a forecast for the future. I say, can I see your financial model? And they say, yes, we've got historical books and stuff like that, but they don't have a forward-looking financial model. And as a CEO, you're not looking backwards. CEO's job is to look forward. So let's talk about these 2 documents and what they can do for you. Of course, focusing on only 2 documents is metaphorical. You're going to have all the tools and applications and things, as I mentioned before. But these are going to be the 2 that are super important for your success. They've had the biggest impact on my career, and they're going to have a huge impact on your company's future growth and profitability. While I've already stressed the importance of these 2 documents, I honestly can't stress enough how important they are. I'll throw this other reason out why the strategy deck and financial model are so important. They're going to have a massive impact on your company's final outcome. Most of us are not going to be talking about IPOs. We're really going to be talking about being acquired. It's going to be super important to the financial outcome. I'm going to explain how in just a minute. Before we get into that, alert, I have a bonus mindset for you. Remember I told you there was going to be a hidden 4th CEO mindset. Well, this is the time and place. The 4th, number 4 CEO mindset is the importance of storytelling. But wait, I'm just an entrepreneur. No, you're a storyteller. You're a writer and a movie director and a songwriter and a singer. You have to tell stories. Why is it important? Well, let's just hear some of the great entrepreneurs and what they think about storytelling. Steve Jobs said, the most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, the values, the agenda for an entire generation. Boy, If anybody kind of lived up to their own statement, it was Steve Jobs, who changed an entire generation of the way we interact with everything via our phones. So Richard Branson said, storytelling is the most underrated skill in business. And last but not least, Jeff Bezos said, if you can't tell a good story, you're never going to make it as an entrepreneur. So don't take my word for it. There's a lot better entrepreneurs and smarter people than me that talk about the importance of storytelling. And so CEO mindset number 4 is you need to become a good storyteller. So why does storytelling matter in business? First and foremost, it engages and inspires your stakeholders. It simplifies complex concepts. It builds emotional connections. It differentiates your brand. It inspires action and buy-in both inside and outside your company. It enhances your marketing and sales. It communicates your why, drives team alignment. It strengthens resilience, and it creates a lasting legacy. Storytelling matters a lot. When somebody decides to acquire or invest in your company, they're literally buying the story of your company. That's it. Of course, mathematically, they're buying revenue and EBITDA or a strategic asset, but they won't buy revenue and EBITDA without a story. Probably they won't even know what the revenue and EBITDA is unless they're interested in the story first. So you've got to be able to tell a story. So the bonus mindset review is the elite CEO is also an elite storyteller. And guess what? What tells your story? Your strategy deck and your financial model. The strategy deck and your financial model are your company's story, and they're also your roadmap for future growth, profitability, and accountability. You're going to use your strategy deck and your financial model to align your team towards a common objective. I'm going to go through a whole bunch of reasons why these two docs are important, but they're literally going to be your guide for how to grow your company. Further, you're going to be able to hold yourself and your team accountable because, again, those plans are documented. The story is documented both verbally and numerically. Look, if you can't tell yourself the story, it's going to be hard for you to tell other people your story. So you have to get your story straight for yourself. You also have to get it straight for your team. Remember back to CEO mindset number 2. You've got to hire, recruit, and retain and lead the team. Then get them to buy into your vision and execute that vision. Heck, your team needs to be able to tell the world your vision. And that's your story right there. And of course, your clients and partners need to be able to buy your story. And investors and acquirers must buy into your story as well. Hope you caught the last word too, acquirers. Because virtually everybody taking this course or class or implementing the playbook eventually wants to sell their company at some point. Let's talk about acquirers and let's have a word about exit planning. Oh, I think we have another secret bonus in here and some pro tips about exit planning. If you ever want to sell your company, it's better to prepare now. And so I don't care whether you want to sell your company 6 months from now or 6 years from now, or 60 years from now, you're going to want to start your exit planning now. And part of that is having these 2 documents. And it's better to prepare now, not when somebody knocks on the door and you're totally unprepared. If you start preparing now, which is what these 2 documents prepare you for, then you're going to be ready anytime anybody knocks on the door or whatever happens. You're ready for whatever. Even if it's 3 months from now, you're ready. So let's talk about the process of selling your company and what it looks like. Here's how it usually goes down. There's a knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock. The acquirer has knocked on your door. You open the door. You've exchanged pleasantries. They've expressed an interest in potential acquisition. And what's the first thing they're going to ask you? Do you have a company overview? Or do you have a financial model? Sound familiar? As I said, the time to plan is now. Hence the strategy deck and the financial model, which in turn become your company overview and the confidential information memorandum, or the CIM in M&A lingo, and the financials that set the valuation to acquire your company. Let's unpack the second one a little bit. What do I mean by the financial model setting the valuation in the negotiation? Well, this is really common in family-run and small to medium-sized businesses. They don't have a forward financial model. So guess what happens when the acquirer comes in and you hand over your historical financials? That sets the valuation. Your trailing 12 months, not your forward 12 months. Would you rather be judged on last year's numbers or the next 12 months numbers after you've grown a bit? So if you've got a financial model that outlines 24 months of growth and increased margins and better metrics across the board, plus you've been able to prove that growth historically, and oh, by the way, you've been doing financial forecasting for the last 3 years, and oh, here's our budget versus actuals, and we've always hit our numbers or been very close within a very tight variance. All of a sudden now, when you put a 2-year financial forecast in front of your potential acquirer, they've got to believe you because you have a track record of being able to forecast and hit your budget. In any case, if they come in and you allow them to build your forward financial model for you, which all acquirers will, by the way, they're going to set a lower, more conservative target because they want to pay less for your business. Pretty simple. So again, with your own financial model, you're setting the starting line for the negotiation. Here's how it works. There's a big negotiation when people are creating valuation, and the negotiation is going to be over whose numbers can be supported, the acquirers or you, the seller. If you have a good financial model and a good story, you're going to be the one that sets the baseline numbers that drive the valuation. Now, again, that's not to say that they're not going to go and try and chisel you down and reduce your numbers, but the starting point is your financial model, not theirs. That is why it's important to have a great financial model and start running your company off them as soon as possible. The strategy deck and the financial model do in fact have a massive impact on the final outcome of your business, which is the exit. But before we try and sell the company, let's grow it. And again, the strategy deck and the financial model are going to be the things that help us grow because we planned it. And to plan it, you need to be able to tell your own story. If you don't have a strategy deck and a financial model, you're literally driving the car blind. I know everybody's got spidey sense. Oh, I've been running this business for 5 years and I know what I'm doing, but you literally don't have a roadmap for where you're going. You can't lead your company unless you know exactly where you're going. You can't tell your team where you're going unless they all know where you're going. And you can't hold yourself accountable unless you've got a plan as well. And you can't hold your team accountable unless you have a plan as well. So the strategy deck says, what's your company today? Where do you want to go in the future? How are you going to get there? And who's helping you get there? Getting into the specifics like, what's the business look like in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? What's your overall mission or statement or purpose? What are the goals and objectives? What KPIs drive the business? There's a whole mess of those KPIs. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you've got stuff like MPS, revenue, unit economics, employee attrition, revenue, all kinds of stuff that eventually will end up in your strategy deck. So now you're asking, RJ, how do I write a strategy deck in only 30 days? Well, I sense your skepticism, and I've seen it too. Most strategy exercises simply take too long. In fact, they take so long that they usually aren't ever even completed. Most are way too overcomplicated by process, data requirements, all this other stuff. Many exercises simply don't get done. I can't tell you how many times I've started earlier in my career, how many offsites I went to for strategy, and nothing ever came of them because the processes were too bloated and overcomplicated. But as I've stated multiple times now, the 30-day CEO Playbook process is designed to be super fast. And I'm going to give you 10 rules that force vision, speed, incremental progress, comprehensive detail, tactical planning, team alignment, and most importantly, maximum impact. So what are the 10 rules for writing a strategy deck? Rule number 1, the ultimate goal is to quickly summarize your company, what it is today, where you want to go in the future, how you're going to get there, and who's helping you. Rule number 2, keep it simple, superstar. Be fast. As I said, most strategy exercises fail because they take too long. They also never finish because they get bogged down in the details. We're not going to make that mistake. Rule number 3, we only use Google Slides or PowerPoint to write strategy. Actually, if you want to use Canva or some of the new platforms or whatever, that's fine too. The point is you're going to use a slide deck. Text documents require too much time. They require grammar, structure, fully formed thoughts and sentences. Decks are bullet points for brevity and clarity. Number 4, don't think too hard. Just write. Again, people get bogged down in process and they want everything to be perfect. Don't do that. I want you to do a total stream of consciousness right off the top of your head. And again, slide decks are great for that. Bullet points, just a few words that jog your memory. You can form complete sentences later. You already know your business, so you should be able to do this off the top of your head for the first draft. And here's a key thing. Your first draft should literally take no more than 1 hour. Again, we're going stream of consciousness. We're not looking to write a 50-slide deck the first time around. I'm looking for a target length of 5 to 15 slides with no more than 5 or 6 bullets per page. And heck, some of the pages might just be a straw man outline where there's literally a title and you've got to go fill it in later. Another key rule here is text only, no graphics. Graphics will slow you down. We can add the graphics later. This should be a total stream of consciousness exercise in less than 1 hour. In fact, your first draft may literally only be an outline of what you want to say. And you may have just titled each slide. And what you want to do is a straw man. Then you just go in and start filling in the blanks later. But that's it. Total stream of consciousness, 5 to 15 slides. In reality, that first draft is probably more like 8 to 10 or so, 1 hour target, 2 hours max. Rule number 5 for writing a strategy deck. Think of your first draft more as an outline. Use the outline as a foundation for the house and we'll build the house later. The first draft is intentionally brief, but each successive revision will add specifics, then will become tactical plans. So we're going from 100,000 feet view to 30,000 feet to 10,000 feet and then on the ground. The details will come later, but you need to know where to put the details. So again, that's why I think of that first version much as like a straw man and an outline. And then there may be a little bit more detail you can add out as each time you go back to it. Rule number 6, add, revise, and fine tune. Rinse and repeat. Continuously add to it and go back to it. So when I write my first draft, I've got it there, I'm done in an hour. And then invariably, it'll just be, I'll be thinking about what I wrote and I'm like, oh, I got this one thing I want to add to this slide here. And throughout the day, more than once a day, actually a couple times a day, whenever I have a thought, I batch it, I go back and start adding things. And in your 30-day plan, you're going to go back and look back at your strategy deck a couple times a day. You may go back at the end of each day and add things that you learned from all the exercises that you're doing, all the meetings that you're doing. You may go and add more things. And so the point is, you never actually have to sit down and say, oh, I'm going to write this grand strategy deck. No, instead, you sit down for an hour and then you go back multiple times for 15, 20 minutes, maybe even 30 minutes, and build out each section that you had in there. So it never becomes a huge chore. One of the greatest writers of all time is Jerry Seinfeld. You think of him as a comedian, but he's actually one of the greatest comedy writers of all time because he wrote all of his own stuff. And he basically said, your first draft is always going to be writing. And then he would say, rewriting is 95% of writing. That's an incredible quote. Rewriting is 95% of writing. It's a great thing to remember in this process. Don't worry what your first draft is because this whole process is about iteration and revision. Rule number 7 of writing a strategy deck is, who are you writing this for? First off, you're writing it for yourself. The person you need to tell your story to first is yourself. But your team's also going to be using this deck too. So tell your story so that it makes sense to you, but then make sure the story makes sense to your team. This will help you align the team around a clear and coherent strategies and story. Later, as you build the story out, you're going to take certain slides out of that deck and use them for other stakeholders. For example, customers may see certain parts related to sales, and partners may see certain pages that they think about JVing with you. And later, potential investors or potential acquirers may want an edited version of the strategy deck as that confidential information memorandum. You're going to sell the vision. And we can't emphasize enough the importance of storytelling here. Do not underestimate that. Rule number 8 about writing your strategy deck. The strategy document is a living document. It will never be 100% complete. The closest you will ever come is likely 90%, no better. Invariably, you're going to think of new stuff and you're going to build new plans and new initiatives, and it's going to be in a continuous state that's somewhere between 70 and 90% complete. You're never going to get to 100% done because the world changes constantly. So does your business. So does your market opportunity. So you're always going to be changing your plan. Yes, there's going to be certain things that we have to plan and we want to hold and set in stone when we want to be accountable. But again, you're going to update your plan constantly. And depending on the nature of your business, you may be updating the plan quarterly or annually. When new information comes in, you change the plan, which leads us to rule number 9. Make the strategy document your team's document. So remember, it starts off as my document, my CEO document that I could tell the story to myself to get it straight in my own head. Once I've got it mostly straight in my head, and I said mostly because remember, it's never going to be 100% done. Once I've got it mostly straight in my head, I share it with my team, and I'm going to ask for feedback too, because I may have forgotten stuff. They may correct me, they may amend me, maybe I'm wrong on something, but once you write the basic strategy down in the document, you're going to invite your leadership team to make it their own document as well. You're going to ask each functional leader to build out their own section. So the VP of marketing is going to build the marketing section. The VP of products is going to build out the product management section. The head of G&A and HR are going to have their own parts of the strategy document as well. Other things like how we're going to fund the business, all of those things, those all go in the document. But you don't have to write all of it because now you've included your team. And it's become the leadership team's document where all of a sudden this document explodes from 5 to 15 slides to 50 slides as you start seeing the departmental plans and build out of each area. Each author is going to follow the same rules for each of their sections that you've employed here. So they're still going to be brief. And again, they may have their own internal documents for their own departments or their own functional areas using similar writing rules. But this is the leadership team document that runs the company. So we're still keeping it fairly high level, but it's going to be a high level within each department. So it ends up with a fair amount of granularity in terms of the whole universe of the company. The point of rule number 9 is the result of your strategy document will end up becoming an incredibly detailed execution blueprint, which leads us to the last rule, which is rule number 10. The last rule is update this strategy document at a minimum every year during your annual strategy offsite or planning process. And some of these are going to want to be updated throughout the year so you can come up with new things and you can always have new thoughts and new information. But you want to go through this whole process at a minimum once a year and redo the whole thing. And again, it's not hugely time consuming because the methodology here and the processes we're employing to get it done fast. What goes into the strategy doc? Again, it's an iterative approach where the first draft is going to be pretty basic. You're going to have stuff like mission, vision, short history, the current state of the business, perhaps a very simple financial summary of where you are, revenue and income, how we make money today, how we're going to make money in the future, what does our organization look like, i.e. how many employees do we have, what's the geographic dispersion of those employees, or where's our geographic locations, anything like that. We should also have a product overview, what markets we serve, what customers we serve, what products and services we have, kind of like a product portfolio overview, very high level at this point. I also think you should have a challenges and issues page because who doesn't have challenges and issues? I mean, heck, that's the reason we're in business, is to solve challenges and issues. And then I always love having a page that's about opportunities for growth, things that we're not executing today, but we could easily execute on in the future. And then any kind of capital or funding requirements, those are kind of like the basics. That's the basics of the first draft. Subsequent drafts, as you go back in, you're going to start dropping in future iterations all kinds of other things in there. And this might be where you do the straw man yourself and you add some of these sections, but you also may start adding members of your leadership team to co-author this to you. In those later drafts, you're going to start adding in the functional areas like marketing, sales, finance, human resources, technology, client success, customer service, operations, manufacturing, product management, engineering. Whatever the key functional areas of your business, you're going to have kind of a page for each one of those sections, where at some point, when you start bringing in your team, they're going to start being the co-authors of those sections. You're also going to be a little bit more specific about what your growth strategies are. Is it improving execution and efficiency? Is it new markets, new products, bigger people plans? Is it a new go-to-market strategy, new channel strategy? Could it be adding M&A into your arsenal of weapons and things like that? Of course, you're also going to want to drop in a summary P&L from your financial model. So we'll talk about your financial model in a second, but yeah, I always like having a nice summary thing where I can literally just cut and paste that into my strategy doc. And then of course, you're going to need either on that page or a subsequent page, you're going to want some color narrative about your forecast. What are the assumptions? What are the drivers that are going to support that future growth? And details also about how you're going to allocate some of your resources. Those are all suggestions that start coming in the future revisions of that and the iterations. And that again is how that living document goes from a 10-page first draft, and eventually once the team starts co-authoring with you, becomes a 50 or 70 or 100-page slide deck. Like the line item process, I've also included a simple strategy template in the appendix, so it's even easier for you. You don't even need to create your own PowerPoint or Google Slide template. I've literally handed it to you. All you got to do is fill in the blanks for your first draft. And again, you're eventually going to want to make this your own. But phase one should be covered by the strategy template that we included for you. And remember, like everything in this 30-day CEO playbook, KISS. Keep it simple, superstar. Do it fast, do it quick, and really just keep it going through iteration. And then, as I said, by the end of that first phase, that's when you're going to start inviting your team members to come in and help start building out some of those sections. And that's where it really truly becomes a living document. The second document is building your own financial model. And this, again, is super important for your planning. Your financial model is the numerical and quantitative expression of your strategy doc. We spent some time telling our story and building our strategy. Then I love handing the strategy doc over to the CFO or FP&A resource that you have, that financial planning and analysis, and that person will help build your financial model. I give them the strategy deck because they kind of need to know the story well enough to tell it in numbers. So it's very important as part of your storytelling process that your CFO can understand it. That may be your first check as to how good your strategy doc. But now your CFO is going to take that story and tell your company's future story with numbers, a true numerical expression of your storytelling. With both your strategy document and your financial model in hand, you can tell your growth story and have the numbers to back it up. So let's model. How do we create a financial model for growth and profitability? Well, you can't intelligently grow or manage your growth without a forward forecast. It's shocking how many small to medium-sized companies don't really have a financial model. You can't grow without a roadmap. How do you measure your performance if you don't have a financial forecast that becomes your budget that you can use to kind of gauge your performance? So work with a CFO or an FP&A expert to build a full 12 to 24 month financial forecast. And the real focus is going to be on the next 12 months or the following year. But I like having an extrapolation over 24 months just in case. And in some private equity backed companies, you're going to need probably a full 5-year model built out of that. But really the focus and the deep detail is always in that next 12 months. The core of the model's forecast is the income statement. That's really the powerful part that is going to be the value that's going to drive valuation of the company. Here's where you can play offense. You can add the unit economics and new products, new markets and things that go into kind of that revenue page that drives the income statement. But you'll also need a balance sheet, a cash flow analysis, particularly if you have any kinds of products or services, businesses where cash flow is a very big issue. Another thing that's got to be built into the model is a detailed analysis of the unit economics of your revenue model. This is what drives revenue. This is what drives growth. And so if revenue is driven by a certain amount of ad spend, then you have to get a certain ROI. If there's critical conversion metrics, let's say you spend a certain amount on advertising that drives traffic to a landing page or some store or something like that, you need to have those conversion metrics built into your model. If you generate a lead, what are the conversion metrics of that? They all should be built into the revenue portion of the financial model. And that's called the revenue build. The unit economics of the revenue build and the cost structure enables you as the CEO and the exec team to manage both revenue and cost on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis. Once you've got this financial forecast, you can kind of load that into your budget and have something to track. And you can track that down to the quarter, the month, the week, and depending on how large your numbers are, you might be able to track it down to the day or even an hour. I've ran one large e-commerce company where we would track it down to the hour that you could tell how much money the company was making. I ran multiple companies where we were literally tracking revenue and cost down to the day, but it's not necessary for most companies. If you're at least on a monthly basis and quarterly and annually, you're going to be fine. You're going to have a lot of intelligence about how you're doing with the business. You need to be forward looking. So you need this financial model to look forward. And frankly, that's what your CFO is there for too. Your CFO is your forward looking strategic partner on the finance side. Your CPA, on the other hand, is going to be the one who is looking at your historical numbers. The CFO, again, is forward looking just like you are. You're in the middle of building your financial model. I'm going to give you a modeling pro tip as well. One thing I always like to build into my financial models is a little bit of a slush fund. So in my income statement in the OPEX section, I may have a couple of lines where I've overestimated some of the costs or expenses that I know aren't going to quite come in, or I've added some headcount assumptions that I'm going to hire a little bit faster than I probably am. And what that does is if I'm ever having a problem making my numbers, I always know I've got a little bit in my back pocket. So for example, on an aggressive hiring plan, most companies never hire as fast as they actually plan to. So even sliding a starting salary back a month or whatever, it gives you a little bit of an EBITDA boost or a contribution boost. And the same thing is I might overestimate a couple of things. So me and the CFO always kind of know these secret line items, but that's a little bit of a pro tip of how you make sure you always make your numbers. Now, I said this earlier when we were talking about doing the revenue analysis and the line item exercises. And one of the most stunning discoveries about going through the exercise of financial modeling is you realize that almost every CEO I work with has underestimated their revenue growth potential before we did that revenue analysis. And that's kind of stunning to me. Nearly every time I do this exercise with the client, we always come back with a slightly higher revenue and sometimes massively higher revenue estimates than they originally thought. So this is another side benefit of doing the revenue line item analysis plus your financial model. And it may just be my anecdotal experience in the last couple of years, but modeling usually uncovers some revenue potential that you didn't realize there was as well. Also, probably some potential cost savings as you build that out too. Key concepts to build into your model. Remember, and I said this before too, your model is forward-looking. That's again the difference between your CFO and your CPA function. CPA looks backwards, CFO is looking forward. You've got both profit and growth mindset in this. Again, as I said, you want to bake those in where you're trying to maximize profit, or you may be making an operational investment for growth mindset. I think everybody knows how to get profit mindset into a model. If you're making big operating investments and big bets on new product markets and new salespeople, whatever it is, those have to be built into your financial model. And that's the growth mindset being actually reflected in your financial model. Assumptions for growth are key. The ability to quickly change the model is also good. You want to build the assumptions so that you can kind of change things around, or you can do some price elasticity or some sensitivity analysis or something like that. Two features that you absolutely want to build into your financial model are one, a summary P&L page that you can quickly tweak the model and go back and just see kind of what the results, the compounding results are in a very quick snapshot. Obviously that flows throughout the whole model, but just being able to see it on the summary page is really helpful. And it goes without saying, the second really key feature is your assumptions. Whether you put that on a specific assumptions page or you build that into other parts of the model, whether it's the revenue build or the cost build, very critical to have assumptions. But essentially, being able to quickly change some assumptions and do some sensitivity analysis or maybe some price elasticity or something, and then being able to quickly run over to the summary P&L and just see how it flows through either the revenue or the EBITDA or margin percentages or something like that. It's really cool. So I really think those are two very critical things that you have to think about building into your model. It also makes playing with your model a lot of fun, frankly. Some of my most favorite times as a CEO are when my CFO and I are sitting in a room and projecting the model up on a whiteboard or something like that so that we can actually play with it and see with it and kind of like start dreaming of different scenarios and really trying to visualize how our story could take a turn here, take a turn there. And of course, sometimes I play the model and the model drives the storytelling, but a lot of times the narrative is what's driving the model too. Anyway, make sure you build your assumptions page well and have that summary page. Another thing I like to do with our financial model is to tie it back to my historical financials. It's really great to have a full package that looks back at 2 or 3 years of historicals and then looks forward at 2 or 3 years of forward. And when you kind of get into those exit and M&A conversations or fundraising conversations, they're really going to appreciate seeing the historicals and how bolted on to the forward-looking model they are, and that it's kind of like a seamless, the history into the future. And I just mentioned M&A again. This is, again, one of the disciplines of why I want the first forward 12 months. I want that to be bulletproof in my model always. So that's something where I'm going to keep rolling the model forward and focusing on that first 12 months. That's where it should be able to test the scrutiny of yourself. I like red teaming things, my team and my CFO and us together red teaming, so that when somebody from the outside comes in and looks, they're not going to be able to find any holes in the model or any false assumptions or anything like that. In the later years after that 12 months, the second, third, and fourth years, sometimes the most common thing that we do is we just add a simple percentage growth around revenue and a percentage decrease in kind of like the cost assumptions so that you can show expanding margins and things like that. But it's really that forward 12 months that we're going to put most of our effort in. And the outer years are really just going to be kind of like, well, where would this go if we just continued on the trend line of the next 12 months, see what that looks like. So what should my model look like optically or cosmetically? First off, I recommend that you work with a CFO or an FP&A person. They're experts at making spreadsheets tell stories. These financial experts will likely know what to build for you, but you'll want to make sure that they include what I'd call minimum viable model. Could have a hello and welcome page. It's going to have an assumptions page. It's also got your revenue build and unit economics. It has a headcount page. Remember the census exercise, line item exercise we did? You build that into your model, and then you don't need to create a census template or anything like that. That's always where I get my census information, because I've got all my current headcount as well as my future headcount and their hiring dates built into that census page. So you can pull that right out of your model in the future when you do subsequent line item exercises. I'm also going to have an OpEx page that flows into the income statement. I like actually having those kind of separated out and then a summary income statement. Again, there's lots of ways to do this, but those are just some of my personal preferences for being able to view and digest the data in the way that I like to do it. And of course, the monthly P&L and the income statement, you're going to want to have that, as well as I said, the summary P&L that's really just kind of either an annual or quarterly thing. I love the plus minus expanding and contracting cells and things like that, so that you can actually get a really clean look at the summary. Actually, as I mentioned this before, the summary P&L page is fairly important to me because, like I said, I like doing a lot of sensitivity analysis, and just being able to quickly go back and check that is super helpful. And as I alluded to a few minutes ago, a full-scale model should be tied back to historical financials, so you can see monthly cash flow, monthly balance sheets, taxes, deferred revenue, even M&A assumptions in the future too, if you're going to acquire somebody and what that might look like. Could also put fundraising or debt into the model and how those may be employed in your growth strategies as well. Here's kind of a look at what a sample financial model looks like. I've included a couple of templates for financial model in the appendix. They're very basic, rudimentary templates, probably only relevant for a small company. I'm a big fan of bespoke, customized models because every company is so different. But again, we've included some very basic templates in the appendix for you. So you've never done it before and you're a small company, those could be helpful to you. Once you get to a certain scale, you're going to want to work with a CFO, a fractional CFO, or an FP&A expert to kind of do a very bespoke, customized model. Okay. That's the financial model. Once that's done, we now have our two documents. We've got our strategic plan, our strategic document, and we've got our financial forecast. Check, check. That's our story and we're sticking to it. But now, because I've got my strategy document and my financial plan, guess what? I also have my exit plan. I'm ready to go anytime anybody knocks on the door. I'm ready to have an M&A conversation because I have those two documents. And in the meantime, those are the two documents, as I said, that we're going to run our company with. Those are going to be our vision, but they're also going to be our accountability for how we run the company. All right, we're at the end of part 2. So let's summarize what we learned in part 2. The 30-day CEO Playbook is our action plan. First off, we went over our meeting plan, who we're going to talk to and who we're going to gather information and learn from organization as well as outside our organization. That's our meeting plan. We talked about the 5 line item processes: OpEx, census, revenue, product, and competitors. And then, of course, we finished with the 2 most important documents for a CEO to run the business: the strategy deck and the financial model. Now that you know how to run each of the plays in the 30-day CEO Playbook, let's once again review the suggested calendar. Remember, week 1 was about planning your 30 days and doing your mindsets and creating your meeting plan. Week 2 continues your meeting plan, but also does your OpEx, census, and revenue line item analysis. And you'll also start outlining your strategy doc. Week 3, you finish line item reviews with your competitors and your products. And you keep revisiting your strategy doc and you do the first draft of your financial model. And in week 4, you finalize your strategy doc and your financial model. That's it. The 30 days is up and you've got it all done. So now you've got the mindset of an elite CEO. You have a full understanding of your business, your people, your revenue, your cost, your products, your competition, and more importantly, you've got a plan. You've got the story and the numbers to back it up. So what's next? And that gets us to part 3 of the 30-day CEO Playbook. What happens after 30 days? Well, first and foremost, I hope you keep growing. Your CEO journey, as I said, extends well beyond one great month. Looking at our progress, you can see everything we've covered so far. Preface, part 1 mindsets, part 2 playbook, and you've uncovered a 4th bonus mindset and got some exit planning pro tips. Now what? Well, with the playbook, you've built a solid foundation for growth. And if you're not growing, you're dying. So keep growing. As we talked about, some of the processes from your 30-day plan should become part of your normal routine. I'd recommend you repeat the 30-day CEO Playbook every year as part of your annual planning process. We talked about that. And as noted, it goes much faster every time you do this. You get better at it. It becomes easier. You don't need to do all of it. A lot of the data you already have collected now because you've done it once, and now all you're doing is refreshing the data. I also talked earlier about right-sizing the 30-day plan. If you're a small company, make sure that you've right-sized it down to what your scale is. You don't need to do every step every time you do this at some point because it just becomes part of your natural routine. The 30-day CEO Playbook is a great foundation. We've talked about that. But aside from doing the playbook, there's a few other things I want to remind you to do. And the first is be the CEO. You're the leader. Act like it. Sometimes it's very easy when you get down in the weeds and you forget to act like the leader. And by the way, your organization wants to see a leader. So that's one of my reminders. Sometimes you kind of get lost in some of this process and all that. Remember to be the CEO. Assert your leadership. by action. Show decisiveness by making as many easy decisions as fast as possible. That really gives your team a lot of confidence. I've seen this happen in my own career, that when I walked into a house on fire, a lot of times all anybody wants to see is for the leader to make a decision. So even if you make the smallest decision, people are happy and they're delighted and they have confidence in you and the company. So show decisiveness by making as many quick, fast, easy decisions, and also don't shy away from the harder, difficult decisions. Don't delay them either. Build consensus, but make the hard calls. Give credit and praise when good things happen, but take responsibility yourself when the bad things happen. Leave no doubt that you've got this. It's just showing the presence that says, I've got this. And everybody else will have that confidence in you as well. So what happens after 30 days? Some of the things that you could do with the results of this playbook are document your initial assessments and recommendations. Just do a quick deck and present it to your board of directors if you have one. You could present it to your executive coach for feedback. But then I'd present it to my executive team, and then I'd later take an edited version and show it to the whole company. Here's what we did in that 30 days. One of the key things that comes out of the 30-day CEO playbook is that strategy exercise. Again, the 2 documents that result. I also recommend that at least once a year, you take your executive team and have a strategy offsite or a strategy onsite in person or virtual with that team. It's basically taking what you've done with the strategy doc and the financial model, and you're going to really crystallize it and fine tune it with the team and make it very granular so that everybody becomes aligned with that every year. And then again, you're going to ask them to take it down to their teams and do a similar exercise at their functional departmental level so that they're all aligned and everybody is aligned with the overall goal and vision of the company. Remember when we talked about CEO mindset, number 1 is your objective as CEO is to do no work. I do like taking that down to my executive leadership team, although they're the ones running the company. So my goal for them is to do 10% do no work in their daily job so that they have some of that same kind of free time and clarity to think about that. When you extend that concept to an executive offsite, you're also taking them out of the business for a little bit so that they can think about the business, working on the business as opposed to in it in their day-to-day. So that's the value of a strategic offsite. Another thing that I like having come out of a strategic planning process that actually goes into the strategy deck is having just identified like 5 or 6 broad company objectives for the next year. No more than 6. 3 is probably not enough because you've got a bunch of things. There's some things that are revenue focused. There are some things that are people focused and non-financial. About 5 or 6 is what I've found works well. It's simple, and remember, we want to keep it simple. That's another part of our 30-day process. These go into a strategy deck every year. One year they may be 1 through 6. The following year we may replace 3 and 5 and put something else in, or we may update one of them or something like that. But as I said, I like having 5 or 6 key objectives there. And if we have 5 or 6 for the whole company, I would tell everybody on my executive leadership team to take a similar process down to their teams, but maybe they have 3 to 6 goals or objectives for their department. And in some functional areas, there may be as many as 10 things if they've got a lot of moving parts and stuff. If your company is a little bit larger, a medium or large size company, another suggestion I always love giving a CEO is to hire a chief of staff. The chief of staff is somebody who coordinates all of your leadership team and is kind of a go-between you and the leadership team, becomes a proxy for all the directives and visions that you give out to make sure that the leadership team executes on those things. Of course, you're always going to have lots of objectives and things with each individual executive, and the chief of staff can be invaluable in making sure that some of those things get done. So again, it allows you the opportunity to do no work so that you maybe can go focus on some other part of your growth plan or something like that. So it's a great luxury if you can afford it. Earlier in the playbook, I recommended a culture exercise. I don't like the CEO and the exec team to lead a culture exercise. If a CEO leads a culture exercise, it becomes whatever the CEO wants, and people just nod their head, and I don't think they take it as seriously. I like having rank and file lead a culture process. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody from the exec team doesn't necessarily facilitate or check in, but I like having rank and file teammates lead the culture process. You can seed it with some ideas and all that, and facilitate it with somebody from the leadership team. But personally, I don't want the facilitator to be the CEO because there's a natural intimidation factor anytime you have a CEO or a founder in the room. And the CEO has already kind of created the culture when they founded the company, but as the company starts evolving, I really like that, having that culture owned by the team. Another reason I like having rank and file kind of like lead the culture exercises is that we've all had a job early in our career where somebody basically said, here's our mission, here's our culture, and it was kind of rammed down your throat. This way, by having your team from the bottom of the organization up kind of decide what that culture is, there's a lot more ownership in it, and they'll embrace it a lot more than if you just kind of shoved it down their throats. I have a lot of thoughts about company meeting schedule. Meetings are always a great source of coordination and execution and culture, but they can also be a total and ginormous waste of time. So I'd ask you to think about the cadence and purpose of who attends various meetings. For me as a CEO, I've become almost maniacal about the way I manage my meetings. It's very standard to have one-on-ones with your directs, but I found one-on-ones actually be kind of counterproductive because too often I'm meeting with the VP of sales and then I meet with the VP of marketing in one-on-ones, and I realize I've got to call a third meeting to have the two of them talk to each other about what we just talked about in the one-on-ones. The same thing with product management and engineering. I'm like, why are we having two separate one-on-ones when if I have a one-on-two, I don't have to have another meeting to get them together, or I don't have to tell them to go have a meeting and then wonder what happened in the meeting. So I've gone away from one-on-ones, and more often than not, I have one-on-twos and sometimes even two-on-twos. What's a two-on-two like? Well, let's say we've got some big budgeting going on with product and engineering or something like that. I might have the CEO myself, the CFO, the VP of product management, and the CTO together. And there's a two-on-two, but we're having a very productive meeting about product roadmap and all that, and able to kind of fill the CFO in at the same time so they know kind of what's going on in terms of where we're making investments and where we're going to spend money. I don't do many one-on-ones anymore. And if somebody needs to discuss a private or personal matter, there's usually time at the end of a one-on-two or a two-on-two for a short one-on-one with a CEO. And of course, if somebody really needs to sit down with you every once in a while and have either a mentoring session, a coaching session, or talk about a really big problem that may involve some confidentiality, of course, you're going to give them that meeting. But in terms of my regularly scheduled meetings, I almost never have one-on-ones anymore. They're usually one-on-twos and two-on-twos. As for executive staff meetings, I love doing them weekly. I think it's a great way to coordinate your leadership efforts, but those are just my direct reports. And I think a weekly team meeting is a good thing, but make sure you're all coordinated. I know there's a lot of CEOs and founders who like daily stand-ups and huddles. Personally, I'm not a fan of those at the executive level, but I do think they can be very useful inside your functional department. And that's kind of more of a personal preference thing. I personally don't like them, but I also recommend do what you think is the right thing, because I know a lot of CEOs who love daily stand-ups and huddles. I think where I've had problems with stand-ups and huddles is when you start getting to a larger company and they become a little bit unruly and hard to manage, and they start losing their brevity and their succinctness. That I like in medium to larger size companies, I have something that I call M staff, which is my management staff. And this would be all the second and possibly even third level managers that don't necessarily have direct access to me as a direct report. So these would just be the people, my direct reports, the level just below the direct reports. So I give them a forum where they've got access to me. Interestingly, I also don't invite the E staff to the M staff meeting. I don't want there to be a filter, with those second and third level managers where their bosses are sitting in there. I don't want them afraid. So for example, the director of marketing, I don't want them worried about what they say when the VP of marketing is in the room. And I just want them to have that access. Typically, I will do an M staff once a month. Remember, E staff is every week. Once a month is probably right for M staff. And I think it's a great way also to have exposure to what your succession plan is going to be for every functional area and give you a chance to identify future stars and people who can be great leaders too, and maybe your next generation's exec staff. The M staff is also a great way to train your junior managers to be in top level meetings. As for all hands meetings, I found that every other week is a good cadence. I've been in companies where once a month wasn't enough, and I've been in others where once a week was way too much. So every other week to me feels about right. All right, in part 2, we went through the entire 30-day CEO playbook. It's an incredible foundation for you to be a great CEO and to have a foundation for growth. But here in part 3, what else should you be thinking about as a CEO? Well, as I said earlier, keep growing, keep learning, and keep doing. So beyond 30 days, what are the things that you need to think about as the CEO? Well, here's an inventory of things. And these are the topics that I work on with my CEO coaching clients. And some of these are going to sound familiar, but a lot of them we didn't have time in the 30-day period to talk about. First, profit mindset versus growth mindset. We did talk about that. That's an ongoing thing you need to think about. Basic leadership development, strategic planning, tactical planning, FP&A, financial modeling, hiring the exec team, retaining key execs, leading the executive team in board meetings, roles and responsibility definition, systems, processes, and execution. I mean, this is the key operations of the company. We didn't talk a lot about this because, again, this playbook is to get to know your business and master your business. The systems, processes, and execution are a very big area to focus on until you have the functional experts on your executive leadership team that can take over all those systems and processes. As the CEO, I'm always very interested in the people who generate revenue. So the sales team and overall comp structure of a sales organization is super important to the CEO. Your marketing and advertising strategy, exit planning, M&A strategy, inbound and outbound M&A. I also am a big fan of a business development function. This is when you hire a utility player who is not in sales and is not in product, but is there to kind of like do strategy and figure out what new things should we experiment with, or can make revenue out of the bits and pieces of the other assets that you have that don't necessarily fall into one of your departmental budgets. Love a business development function. So it's super important to have a business development function in a medium to large size company. And the business development function oftentimes becomes the office of the CEO. Every time I've got a harebrained idea that I want to run down, I want the head of business development to go run down the idea and develop it and see if we can potentially launch it or integrate it as a product or something like that in our company. So that's an important one. You should also get involved in your product development and technology processes and organizations. Accountability is a big part of the CEO role. And of course, you've got accountability for yourself, but you also have to hold your team and your company accountable to the plans and the stories you have. And if you have a board of directors, obviously you've got accountability to a board of directors. CEO therapy. This is another thing you should be thinking about. CEO therapy and stress reduction. Do you have a safe place or a safe space where you can share the stresses and anxieties and the pressures of the CEO role, which is the loneliest and hardest job in business? And of course, I think it's super important for you as a CEO and founder to think about work-life balance. You can't get too overworked, stress, and you have to maintain work-life balance because you need to have enough energy to do your job. And you also need to have the endurance to do the job for the long haul. And then we work on personal and professional development, and big, wild, and crazy idea grokking is something that the CEO really needs to be the king or queen of. The BHAG idea, the big, hairy, audacious goal. Another thing I always recommend for CEOs is to join peer groups and CEO communities. I just said that the CEO role is one of the loneliest jobs in business. You don't have a lot of people that can relate to the pressures and stresses of the things you have to think about and the balls you have to juggle. Very few people can relate to that. And you can't necessarily talk about this stuff with your exec team. You can't talk about it with your board of directors in a lot of cases. And you certainly shouldn't burden your spouse with some of the things. And a lot of your friends aren't going to have this experience either. You don't even have to be from the same industry because the CEO role has some characteristics about it that are just so unique to the actual job itself and not necessarily an industry. So again, it doesn't have to be an industry group. Sometimes you will join a CEO group that is very specific to a certain industry. But I often find that the most successful peer groups that I've been in, everybody had a completely different type of company and different industry. And it was really good to kind of hear that they were going through the same things that I was, even inside of a specific industry. Okay, so we're getting towards the end here. We've covered a lot in the 30-day CEO playbook. You've essentially got a checklist to master your business and become an elite CEO. If you follow the playbook, I'm confident you're going to achieve great results and understand your business and opportunities like never before. We're going to do a full recap of the entire 30-day CEO playbook in a few minutes. But before we do that, I want to take a minute to talk to you about how to execute the playbook. After all, what good is all this knowledge if you can't put it into action? Think about it. We just threw the equivalent of a 2-year MBA program at you in the same time as a Netflix movie. From here, it's up to you to make it happen. And we want to make sure that you make it happen. With the 30-day CEO playbook in your mental toolkit, you've got 2 powerful options to transform these ideas into action. There's do it yourself and do it together. The do it yourself or DIY version of the CEO playbook is exactly what you're watching right now. We wanted to put this online so as many CEOs and founders as possible could have access to this content. You can totally use the insights and frameworks shared in this video to build your growth strategy and scale your business on your own timeline. The DIY method is an excellent option for self-starters who think independently. That said, we also think you can achieve even greater impact with a little bit of help. And that's where the second option comes in. We think you can supercharge your success with the 30-day CEO Mastermind. For a small fee, you can join our 6-week sprint mastermind group to amplify the course's impact and fast-track your success. In this collaborative setting, you'll experience personalized feedback, bring your challenges and questions to the group, receive tailored advice from experienced peers and mentors. Second thing you get with the CEO Playbook Mastermind is actionable accountability. Mastermind members hold each other accountable, ensuring that you stay on track and execute consistently, and group motivation of a team cheering you on. The third thing you get are diverse perspectives. You're going to learn from other CEOs from other industries who bring fresh ideas and innovative solutions that make the playbook even more valuable than just this video. Faster problem solving. You skip trial and error by leveraging the group's collective expertise to overcome obstacles more efficiently. And lastly, unparalleled networking. You're going to be in part of a small community. You're going to build lasting relationships that go way beyond the CEO playbook with like-minded leaders who are just as committed to growth and excellence as you are. So you're probably asking, why does the mastermind last 6 weeks for the 30-day implementation? Well, that's a great question. And the answer is pretty simple. We want to ensure you knock the execution of the playbook out of the park. So we'll do a week of mindset prep and then the 30-day execution and finish it off with a week of debrief and next steps in your development to become an elite CEO. Or you can accelerate and maximize your impact by joining the 30-day CEO Mastermind, which I think is the fastest way to get maximum impact and exponential results. Either way, the next step in your journey as a CEO starts right here with the 30-day CEO Playbook. All right, have you enjoyed the 30-day CEO Playbook? If you have, please hit the like button and subscribe for more game-changing strategies to master your business and become an elite CEO. And if you look at the link below, you can also find out how to sign up for the 30-day CEO Mastermind, or you can just visit the30dayceo.com. All right. We're at the end, so let's go for the big finish of the 30-day CEO playbook. That's it. Now you know the playbook. You now have 30 days to do it and 30 days to become a better CEO. So let's recap all of this super quick. Your 3 CEO mindsets: the do no work objective, the 3 key to-dos, your balance of profit and growth mindset. Then you've got your meeting plan, meeting your leaders, managers, key individual contributors, your rank and file, select rank and file, customers and competitors, your 5 line item reviews, your OpEx income statement line item, the employee census line item, the revenue analysis line item, the product portfolio review, and your competitor lists. And the 2 documents you need to run your company, the company strategy doc and the financial model. Remember, these 2 docs tell the story of your company. And finally, you've completed the course portion of the 30-day CEO Playbook. Now it's time to think about your post 30-day plans. Keep growing as a CEO, keep learning, and keep doing. Thank you so much for implementing the 30-day CEO Playbook. Again, I hope you found it valuable, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you are crushing it and are already thinking of new ways to grow your company. Again, if you like this, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. And to learn more about the 30-Day Mastermind, again, the link below, or go to www.30dayceo.com. We're here to help. Thank you for watching, and good luck.